Chairperson Kogler, we're ready to begin.
Very good. Thank you. I'm Chairperson Mark Kogler, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the Planning Commission meeting of September 14th, 2021. At the beginning of the meeting, there's one little piece of business that we have to take care of, and I'll cover that now. Please note that due to the COVID-19 emergency and as allowed by the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, which allows for a deviation of teleconference rules required by the Ralph M. Brown Act, Planning Commission meetings will be held by teleconference only until further notice. The video stream of Planning Commission meetings presentations will be live streamed and available to play later on YouTube by accessing the following link, www.prcity.com/YouTube. Rather than attending in person, project applicants and members of the public must call 805-865-7276 to participate via phone. The phone line will open just prior to the start of the meeting at 6:30 p.m. or written public comments can be submitted via email to planning@prcity.com. Written comments received prior to 12 noon on the day of the meeting will be posted as an addendum to the agenda online at www.prcity.com/agenda-center/planning-commission-5. That's the numeral 5. If submitting written comments in advance of the meeting, please note the item on the agenda. For reference for the public, the same information I just went through is at the top of the agenda and is available there with the links, which is should point you in the right direction. With that, we need to call a meeting to order with a Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm going to ask if Commissioner Covarrubias could do that for us this evening, please.
Would be my honor.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Christensen?
Present.
Commissioner Covarrubias?
Here.
Commissioner Davis? Commissioner Davis? Commissioner Gibson? Commissioner Jorgensen?
Present.
Commissioner Neal?
Here.
Chairperson Kogler?
Here.
So the record will reflect that Commissioner Davis and Gibson are absent. Commissioner Gibson did contact staff that he would be unavailable for this meeting.
Very good. Thank you. Staff introductions, please.
Yeah, Warren Frace, the Community Development Director. With me tonight is Darren Nash, the City Planner. Lori Wilson, our Assistant Planner. Darcy Delgado, our Associate Planner. David Athey, City Engineer. Jessica Ferguson and Ashley Peterson, both Administrative Assistants.
Good, thank you. Next item on our agenda is introduction of the new City Manager, Ty Lewis. His picture has been on screen for a few moments for some of us, and there's something that looks different about him other than just the facial hair. Maybe it's the manner of dress, I'm not sure. So, Warren, is there an intro to this item, or Mr. Lewis, are you just going to launch into this?
I don't need any fanfare. That's okay.
No introduction needed. Go for it. Thank you.
I just wanted to take a few minutes this evening to, introduce myself to those of you that don't know me. I'm Ty Lewis. I'm the new city manager, your former police chief. It's an honor to be here in my new capacity, and I'm trying to make all these different advisory body board meetings to say a few words, and mostly to thank everybody, those of you that are commissioners, staff, everybody that volunteers their time to be a big part of what we do here at the City of Paso Robles. This is such an important function. We couldn't do it alone. And your time and your dedication and what you do for the community doesn't go unnoticed. It's super important to how we run the city on a day-to-day basis. So from me to everybody here on the commission tonight, it's a big heartfelt thank you. And I wish I could have been there in person to meet with everybody tonight. As we know, COVID's been impacting a lot around not only the city, but the county and the state and federal level, around the world for that matter. So we've been making some adjustments accordingly, but hopefully we'll get back to some normalcy soon, and I'll be able to come in and shake some hands and say hi to everybody personally. But with that, I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has, or if you need anything from me in particular. My door and my email, my phone is always available.
Thank you. We're looking forward to working with you. You obviously have a great history with the city that I'm sure you'll put to good use in your new role as well. Any comments or questions from fellow commissioners for Manager Lewis, I guess I should say? Gotta get used to that.
Letting me off easy tonight.
You are. We will not be so kind, I'm sure, in the future.
I have a
Thank you for being with us tonight, and we genuinely do look forward to working with you as the time goes on.
Thank you so much. I very much appreciate it.
Okay. Next on our agenda is general public comments. I don't have any listed, do I, Jessica? This is regarding matters that are not on the agenda this evening.
I believe
Staff, is
we
there anybody-
actually do have, I'm not sure if Mr. Gustafson is on the line for general public comment or if he's calling about a specific item. Can we confer with him, please?
Certainly.
Okay, I want to talk about the amendment to the conditional use permit applicant Fair Sky Properties.
Okay, we'll bring you back on, sir, after the item is presented then.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for checking on that, Jessica. So there
You're
are no
welcome.
others, correct?
There are none.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Our next item is any agenda items proposed to be tabled or rescheduled. Do we have any of those?
There are none tonight.
Very good, thank you. Okay, we move into the public hearings portion of our agenda this evening, of which we have 3. The first of those we'll hear now. It's pertaining to Dub's Green Garden Conditional Use Permit Amendment, CUP 19-06/AMD 21-02/P21-0037. The property is located at 1232 Black Oak Drive, APN 008-051-024, and the applicant is Grace Hall. Staff, do we have a report, please?
Thank you, Commissioner Kogler. This is Lori Wilson, Assistant Planner. I'll be taking us through our first item tonight, which, as you mentioned, is an amendment to Conditional Use Permit 1806 for Dub's Green Garden. Their site is located at 1124 Black Oak Drive. It's just south of the new Echo Homeless Shelter and then next to the Paso Casino. This is located in our Riverside Corridor Zoning District. A little bit of background for you on this site here. Back in 2019, the city adopted an ordinance which would allow medical marijuana delivery services along with an approved conditional use permit in both the Riverside Corridor and then other commercial industrial zoning districts. It does not permit medical marijuana to be offered, displayed, sold from any sort of storefront or retail location. All other commercial marijuana activity is prohibited, so it's strictly just for office use for medical cannabis delivery services. In that same year, in 2019, Debs was the first to get a conditional use permit approved at this location, and they've been operating on Black Oak Drive since then.
Lori, can I jump in for a second? Commissioner Kogler, I think Commissioner Davis has joined the meeting. Can you confirm that for us?
Yes, Commissioner Davis, are you in attendance?
I am. I had technical difficulties. I am here. Thank you.
So the record will reflect that Commissioner Davis is in attendance in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. So moving on, the request before us tonight is to amend their conditional use permit. The use permit does entitle the entire structure to be used as cannabis delivery office, and there's 3 units within the structure. So the applicant's requesting to use Unit A as a retail convenience store. They intend to operate 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week. And as I understand it, they will be offering items similar to that you would find in a gas station, snack foods, personal care products, just kind of easy convenience items. So the floor plan that you see before you on the left is what was originally approved with a conditional use permit. So right now, Unit B is occupied by Dubs for the cannabis delivery office use. And Unit C, right next to that, is also occupied by a different business, but the same use, the medical cannabis delivery. The applicants had a hard time finding another tenant to come in and occupy Unit A. So they're looking at other options, and hence the request to be able to have a general retail use here. Floor plan that you see on the right is what was provided by the applicant with this amendment request. They're not proposing any major changes to the floor plan at all, or any changes really at all. They'd be occupying Unit A, which is on the south side of the building. They would have to get a minor tenant improvement permit just to convert it to that retail use. There's going to be, I'm sure, some minor electrical work, and then more importantly, to make it ADA accessible for future patrons coming in there. Staff would like to note that there is a separate entrance to Unit A off of Black Oak Drive that patrons can use there, aside from the entrance that you see towards the center of the building, which goes into a common hallway and allows entrance to all 3 units. One other note here before we move on to the next slide is, again, I just want to reiterate that the current entitlement does entitle all 3 units, if the applicant wished, to be used as the cannabis delivery office. So this amendment is not going to change the fact that they could in the future choose to convert back from the retail use to the cannabis use in Unit A. It would require there's a condition in the report that would require a site plan review process. So that would go before the DRC, and just to make sure that security is in place and anything else needed to convert Unit A back to the cannabis delivery if the applicant wished to in the future. The applicant provided a couple of photos. There were some questions when this went to DRC, just kind of on how the internal operations worked of the common hallway area. There are security requirements that they're required to provide for the state. Some of that being, you see those key lock pads on the doors on the left-hand side. Those are for units B and C. And then just a photo of the entryway off the parking lot there into the common hallway. One of the state requirements is that anybody aside from staff is not able to access those units that are being used for cannabis delivery office use. A few conditions that have been added along with this amendment. The first is that staff is recommending that alcohol and tobacco sales be prohibited from this site. State California Business and Professional Code says that any state licensed cannabis entity cannot sell alcohol or tobacco products from any premises licensed by the state. So being that this entitlement, their current conditional use permit does entitle the entire building, structure, or premise will have you, the staff is recommending that alcohol and tobacco sales be prohibited as one of the conditions on this amendment. Also, the fact that this amendment's not taking away the ability for them to use Unit A in the future as cannabis delivery office if they wish. Should there be any future ordinance amendments, if the city adopts changes in the future that would allow different uses in this zone, in order to utilize one of those uses, the CUP would also have to be amended. The floor plan would need to be amended just as we're doing tonight to incorporate any changes. In regards to signage, just a note, the original CUP did not allow for any signage for Dubs or any other business that comes in to do medical cannabis delivery. For the retail portion of the business, though, they would be allowed to have signage. And then lastly, in regards to security, there's, as I mentioned, significant state requirements with respect to security that they're abiding by. So staff is not recommending any additional security measures with this amendment. So the options before the commission tonight would be to approve draft resolution A, which would approve the conditional use permit amendment 21-02, subject to the specific conditions of approval as recommended. You may approve with modifications to those site-specific conditions that are recommended tonight. Deny the application for CUP amendment based on findings, or refer back to staff for additional analysis. So that does conclude staff's report. I believe we do have Ms. Hall on the line with us, the owner of Deb's Green Garden, to assist with any questions, and I'm happy to do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. I guess I would ask Ms. Hall if there's anything you would like to add to the staff report before we have commissioners run through and ask questions that we may have. Okay, hearing none, I'll move into questions from commissioners to staff and or the applicant. Hello? Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Hello?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Grace Hall. I was muted. I had to unmute myself.
Okay, we can hear you clearly now.
Sorry,
Are there some comments you would like to make before we turn it over to the Planning Commission for questions?
Yes, I just have one comment that I'd like the commission to consider, and it is about the tobacco sales there at the unit. I do currently hold a tobacco license for Unit A, and I believe there seems to be some misinterpretation of the rules and regulations of the Cannabis Bureau and what a licensed premise is. And License A is not a licensed premise under the Cannabis Bureau. So I just want to make the commission aware of that. And I do hold a tobacco license. I have for the last 2 years in anticipation of opening up a convenience store, which I've talked to the Cannabis Bureau beforehand, and then also working with the CDTFA that licensed us to, gave us a license for tobacco in that unit. They also contacted the Cannabis Bureau to make sure that that wouldn't conflict with any of the licenses. And as long as there's 3 legal units here, and they said that we could designate a tobacco license for Unit A, that's fine. And then I've had it for 2 years, so I would just like some clarification on that. And it would put us at a big disadvantage not to be able to sell tobacco. I'm not asking to sell alcohol. I'm not going to sell alcohol. I would like to be able to sell tobacco products, though. Thank you.
Thank you. That information is countered everything that was in our packet, so we'll have to have some staff assistance to sort that out. I don't know, staff, if you would like to do that now, or if you want to address other questions that we may have first and come back to that.
Yes, Commissioner Kogler, we do have the city attorney on the line to assist with answering that question. If you'd like to do so now, I'd recommend having Isaac assist with that.
That sounds good. Thank you. Please proceed.
Hi, Planning Commissioners. This is Isaac Rosen. Good evening this evening. The item before the Planning Commission this evening with respect to the amendment to the conditional use permit, and specifically applicants' request that the designated structure be allowed to sell tobacco products from Unit A. The city's position with respect to its recommendation is that the designated structure for purposes of the prohibition on the sale of alcohol and tobacco is the full 1124 Black Oak site, and that's pursuant to the city issued conditional use permit provided to this applicant in 2019. So although the state certainly obviously licenses, and a state license is required to sell cannabis products, and in this case, the city has quite a limited use that's allowed in terms of cannabis. And that's what the local CUP approval states, that they can have this medical marijuana delivery office out of the Black Oak site. So the conditional use permit that was approved by the city in 2019 allows the applicant now or in the future to have a office for medical cannabis out of the full site. And there's language within the staff report that's based on staff's discussion with applicant that applicant would like to retain that conditional use as approved by the Planning Commission for the full site. which is how tonight's agenda has been noticed. So it's city staff's position that the local CUP approval and the ability to obtain a state cannabis license out of Unit A in the future makes a prohibition under state law on alcohol and tobacco products relevant. There's a specific statute under the Business and Professions Code 26001 that defines premises as the designated structure owned, leased, or otherwise held under the control of the applicant or licensee where the commercial cannabis activity will be or is conducted. So again, the applicant has sought to amend the CUP in this instance to allow a retail use out of Unit A, which presently does not have a state license for cannabis sales, but may in the future. And I believe Lori has sort of put up the relevant state license regulations and sort of staff's recommendation and where it comes from under statute. I would say really it is related to the underlying local approval that the city has issued, which is a conditional use permit for all 3 units on the site. And applicants requested that that does not change. There's no revocation on that conditional use in Unit A. So the whole site is currently entitled for the possibility of a conditional use under our state. Under both the state licensing requirements, but also under our municipal code.
Okay, thank you. So your suggestion would be that we would proceed on course this evening, presuming that there is no tobacco sales involved, which would be consistent with the notice for this item that occurred on the agenda and the information that was in the packet, and that we should proceed accordingly. Is that correct?
That's correct. That is staff's recommendation. Additionally, I would note, the municipal code does allow the planning commission to impose such conditions as necessary to secure the purposes of the zoning code. And so the CUP amendment is before the planning commission this evening for their consideration. It's staff's recommendation that consistency with state law, because the full site is entitled under our local code to allow cannabis office use, that the finding be included as part of the conditional use conditions of approval as part of this amendment.
So is that yet an additional finding that we should make this evening, or is that embodied within what we already have?
It's embodied within staff's recommendation. Specifically, there's language about municipal code section 2123-260 that allows the planning commission to impose such conditions that's cited in the resolution. And within the findings for the required amendment to the CUP under the municipal code, there is a finding that the requested use will not be detrimental to the health and safety of the neighborhood or the city at large. And so staff's recommendation with respect to alcohol and tobacco is contained within those conditions of approval within the resolution before the planning commission this evening.
Okay. All right. I'd like to move into questions from the planning commissioners on this topic or others related to this for staff specifically, and perhaps with some embellishment by the applicant as well if need be. Let me start with Commissioner Jorgensen.
Thank you, Chairman Kogler. I just have one question. In the staff report on page 11, it states that the hours of operation proposed for the convenience store are from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. That doesn't sound like that's correct. So that is my question, to have that clarified, please.
This is Lori Wilson. Thank you for pointing that out. That is an error. They intend to operate 7 days a week.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Davis, questions?
I just wanted to know if, Lori, you could explain a little bit more the kinds of non-cannabis retail products that will be sold there. Could there be anything that required a prescription sold there, or is it just like beverages, candy bars? I mean, could you be more specific on behalf of the applicant?
Sure. Yeah, as I understand it, it's more of a general retail use, but they intend to do convenience items as they described it, as what you would find, walking into Chevron, like you mentioned, candy, drinks, toiletries. They've mentioned that it would be a good opportunity to serve those staying at the Echo homeless shelter, so providing different items that they may need for that. I don't believe that they would be able, I don't believe that involves any sort of prescription related products. That'd be more of a pharmacy type use.
Any other questions, Commissioner Davis?
Sorry, I was muted again. Lori, is part of the business, do we know the name Black Oak? The only reason I ask that is there's another business located in the vicinity. So for circulation purposes, it might be kind of confusing. Is it your understanding that's going to be the name of the retail outlet?
That is my understanding. Yes, the applicant has applied for a business license, and that's the name that they've designated on that. They can certainly jump in and clarify if there's been any changes, but right now it is the Black Oak.
Okay, yeah, I just asked for circulation and confusion purposes. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Covarrubias.
Thank you. I want to thank Ms. Hall and staff for providing the additional information about the common use area. I was on the original DRC, and that was a concern, but those the pictures provided and the explanation of that really helped. So I want to thank you for that. I apologize if I'm missing something, and I was listening intently to the city attorney. I just want to be clear. So the convenience store aspect that is being proposed, there will not be alcohol and tobacco sales, or there will be tobacco only sales. Can that be clarified?
Sure, I believe I can clarify that. So the current resolution and conditions approval before you tonight would prohibit both tobacco and alcohol from being sold at this location.
Okay, and of course I would assume then that Ms. Hall understands that and is in agreeance to that as well, correct?
Well, I don't believe that she's in agreeance to it, but we did discuss this with the applicant ahead of time, and so she's knowledgeable.
Okay, so I guess my general statement, and this might be very broad, but understanding that the applicant may not agree with it, which is perfectly fine. How is this monitored? I mean, is there a way for us to monitor? Does the staff, the city, I mean, how is this monitored? If once the convenience store is opened, what's to prevent tobacco sales from occurring?
So that would be something that would be monitored with the city business license that would be issued to them. There could be, indication on that tobacco and alcohol sales would not be allowed with this particular use. And then they are subject to revocation of the conditional use permit if the conditions of approval that are tied to it are not met. So there would be some recourse that staff would have should they decide not to abide by that condition.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. And I know it's not an easy task, but I guess my concern is there really is truly no monitoring system for something like this. I would assume, and understandably so, that Ms. Hall, in order to be competitive, feels like she would need to sell tobacco products. I had a little bit of concern on the DRC to begin with about the ability for something like this to survive in that area, knowing that there's already a very similar type AM/PM gas station type products just down the street. But I am pro-business. I always like to see businesses opening in Paso Robles. I certainly want Ms. Hall to be successful, but I have a little bit of a concern that if she wants to be able to sell tobacco products and the city is saying no alcohol or tobacco, how that's going to be monitored. So I guess more of just a statement and a little bit of a concern there for me. Outside of that, I don't have any other questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Covarrubias. Commissioner Neal, questions?
Yeah, Lori, if selling tobacco was important enough to the applicant, could they amend the conditional use permit to remove Unit A from the ability to sell cannabis, or is it just contained in the entire building? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that question does make sense. I'd like to go ahead and defer that to Isaac, though. Are you able to assist with that question? Isaac, are you on mute?
I am. My apologies. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So regarding Commissioner Neal's question, I think something like that is feasible. Staff's recommendation came from discussions with applicant about the conditions of approval that were going to be sought on Unit A, and an understanding that the idea was not to revoke the conditional use right on Unit A. So I think the short answer is I don't think there's anything that would preclude a subsequent CUP amendment if the goal was to remove Unit A from the conditional use under our local authority. And that amendment would be sort of separate from what's under consideration tonight, which is to allow this retail convenience use in Unit A while retaining the full site as approved by the Planning Commission in 2019, which was that the full premises would have that conditional use and be allowed to operate a non-storefront marijuana office space.
Great, thank you. And that's all the questions I have.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Christensen, questions?
Yes, thank you. I had a question that maybe I might have missed it, Lori. Now, this is a delivery business, and so my understanding is there's an office for the delivery business. Where is the supply kept? It's not on site?
Sorry about that. I was just trying to unmute. So the office use does allow them to store the product on site. So on the floor plans here, you'll see each unit has their own associated storage room. And hence the reason for the high security that is also required by the state for these locations. So they do store it on site there, yes.
Thank you. Okay, so I thought that was the case, but I wasn't quite clear. So I appreciate you explaining that a little bit better for me to understand. I thank you. So back to the hypothetical that kind of was just discussed with Commissioner Neal. If it's removed from the current CUP, like for example, Isaac, if this was a condoed type building, for example, there were separate owners that wouldn't have been included in the original CUP probably. So removing from the CUP would be the only recourse that the applicant would have. Is that correct?
Commissioner, I'm not sure I followed the hypothetical with respect to the condos. Just
okay,
that
so
they could. Let me
try and reiterate, kind of reword that. Just, and this is more curiosity than anything. If this building wasn't owned by one owner and these units were owned individually, A wouldn't have probably been included in the original CUP, just it would have been B and C. So is that a big factor, is because it's owned by one person, one entity, the entire property? I guess that's kind of my question.
Yes, I think that is correct. The extent to which the CUP was approved in 2019 versus the amendment now to just change the use on Unit A without amending the underlying conditional use is related to the 2019 approval for the full project site at this address, as opposed to, in contrast, had the CUP issued by the city been for a single unit or multiple, but not all units on the site.
Okay, so theoretically, if I owned a building and I had multiple units and I was leasing out that space and someone went in for a CUP for that particular unit, that may be something that would be allowed under that CUP. But since the CUP included the entire premises, that's the basis for the decision. Is that correct?
I think in part, there are specific findings, both required under state law with cannabis businesses in terms of proximity to schools and other regulations that that I'm sure the applicant is aware of, and certain restrictions under state law, for instance, that you cannot enter from the same location with respect to private residences and within certain feet of certain facilities. So I think it would probably be fact specific about the makeup and the floor plan of the specific dwelling, and then the ability for staff to recommend findings depending on, the required CUP approval conditions, both for a normal conditional use permit, but also those that are specific to this sort of carve out in our municipal code for delivery office space for cannabis.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Isaac. Thanks for juggling through that with me. I apologize. I know it was a little complicated on my end, but I appreciate that very much. That helps me understand this. I don't have any further questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. I have just a few. I need some help understanding how this business is going to work. It's a very nondescript location at the present time. When I visited the other day, most of the parking was cordoned off in some manner with pylons and cones and so forth. There was some discussion about the entry to this unit being off Black Oak. Then we saw pictures of this common corridor with an entry point there. Sheet A2.1 has a note that says this door shall remain unlocked when this space is occupied, and that's referencing the double door off that common entry. Exhibit D states that the common use area has no public access. So I need to better understand or have clarification of how this works, what is going to create a retail appearance so that people are going to know this convenience business is here. Will they be able to park there? How do they enter this building? I know that was a series of questions, so attack them however you would like, staff.
Thank you, Commissioner Neal. So I'll probably go ahead and defer to the applicant to further discuss their thoughts on this as well, but it is staff's understanding that patrons will be able to utilize the Unit A entrance off of Black Oak Drive. And then there is that separate entrance to the common use area that it's my understanding they don't intend for that to be the for the public to have any entry via the common hallway and then into that back door into Unit A. They would have to provide availability to the restrooms there, but again, the main entrance that the public would use would be Unit A. Ms. Hall, would you like to further discuss the parking and just how you plan on intend on making this business visible and operating there further?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, as far as parking, the reason we have cones and we have a barrier set up right now, we have a shared parking area with the casino. So this it's a shared area between both of us, but we're in and out throughout the day. And with the influx of a lot of people coming to stay at Haslow and Echo, our parking lot gets filled up with people at times. So we've just cordoned everything off because we don't want people we don't know parking in our parking lot. And we've talked to the casino about that too. So we work together to make it work for both of us. So that's the reason why the cones are up. But the whole parking area would be for our customers and also for the casino. As far as the entry to the convenience store, like you said before, it would be off of Black Oak. There's a door right there on the diagram. It's the entrance to Black Oak Unit A. That's where customers would be able to come into. The entry that you see that's, I guess it would be east facing with the double doors, that's an entryway only allowed for the delivery services that operate now, which would be Unit B and Unit C. Nobody else is allowed to access through those two doors. And that has to do with state licensing and the Bureau of Cannabis. They're very strict about the way we enter for our delivery service and how we exit and who's allowed to enter through those doors and not. So, I mean, as it is right now, nobody can just come and go as they please through those doors. So that's just an off-limits area.
Okay, picking up on one of the staff comments a moment ago, restroom access would require that security area to be breached. So will customers have restroom access unless there's an access that doesn't show? They will not. Okay.
No, they will not.
Okay. What are your thoughts on signage and any other architectural modifications of the building to give it more of a retail presence?
The only modification, I guess, if you would say that I would ask for would be there's a sign out front that sits right almost on the street, and right now it just has a picture of an oak tree and it says 1124 Black Oak. I would like to, of course, change that to a sign that would state what we do there, that it's a market convenience store. And there's also a large, I guess you would say, billboard type of sign that's on the property as well that goes up into the air. I'd like to know if I could change that to also signify Black Oak Market. People could be able to view that from the freeway, I believe. And I mean, I don't know if you've driven by or actually seen the location, but it looks like a store. It's not used for anything, so it doesn't look like it looks like a store. So I don't see any problem with people not knowing what we do here or anything like that. When we put in for the CUP for the delivery services, all the ADA modifications, the streets, all those were already completed in order to be able to get approved for the CUP. So I don't foresee any other modifications that I would need to make. The inside of the building, this previously was the casino. So in Unit A, we have an excessive amount of outlets in there and lighting and everything. So it's ready to go. It's pretty much a turnkey unit to open up the convenience store. I'm not asking for anything to be done in it at all.
Okay, thank you. Staff, would you talk a little bit more about signage? Will that require DRC review and approval?
Yes, any additional signage on this, or any signage on this building would come before the DRC for review. And then staff would also like to clarify a little bit of information on the restrooms, if I could.
By all means, please do.
So we did clarify that in order to meet the state building code for this retail type use, that they would have to provide access to the restrooms for the patrons. I'm curious, though, the question for Ms. Hall, it looks like there's a separate entrance to the restrooms on the west side of the building. Perhaps they could access through there instead of having to go through that common use area. Would that be an option, Ms. Hall?
There is a back entrance that's it's not a licensed area, the backyard area, and there is another entrance that way. We just call it the back door entrance back that way, and the only thing that you can access are the two bathrooms there, and of course the hallway. But I didn't know that we have to provide public bathrooms to customers.
That is correct. That's for the state building code that restrooms be provided. But if there was a way in order to do that from the backside of that building shown there on the west, as opposed, so you're able to abide by state security rules with that hallway, perhaps that would be an option.
Yeah, there is a separate door in the back area.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't think we have to necessarily focus on the detail because building folks would focus on that, but that will require obviously some kind of wall construction and closing off a portion of that. Otherwise you go in that back door, you have access to the full back hallway. So, but we don't need to avail ourselves of the design solutions there. I think we can just note something needs to be addressed in that regard. Any other comments, questions rather, I should say, that the commissioners may have thought of as we've gone through one by one? Okay, hearing none, I think we will open the public hearing on this item. I know we do have one individual at least, Dale Guston, who would like to comment. Mr. Guston, if you're on the line, you have the floor for your 3 minutes. Please proceed.
Dale Guston, 945 Spring Street. Yes, I'm familiar when they applied for the medical marijuana applications. I'm also aware of our endeavor to provide a homeless shelter in the close proximity to them. And so I've got grave concerns. Part of the homeless shelter is trying to get people off any kind of substance abuse And here we've got a storefront that has a connecting hallway to it, and they want to keep the medical. I've seen people before you could buy recreational cannabis. They could get a prescription from any phony doctor online and go and buy medical marijuana anywhere. And this is too much of a temptation for them to take a medical marijuana certificate into the convenience store and buy their marijuana right there. And in essence, this convenience store is becoming a storefront instead of just a convenience store. Unless they drop the medical marijuana zoning or permission on the use permit for the convenience store, you're inviting trouble.
Anything else you'd like to add, Mr. Guston, to that?
No, I just don't think that any. In fact, the applicant even indicated they might want to apply for a storefront. As far as the convenience store, there's not only AM, PM, there's a full market right across the street from it. I think it's a sham. It's a guise to get to operate black market marijuana out the door. I'm sorry. That's the way I feel about it.
Okay, thank you for your comments, sir. Are there other individuals who'd like to comment on this item? I don't show anybody in the queue. Is that correct, Jessica?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. I would ask staff, well, let me ask if there's any other public comments one more time. If not, staff, would you like to clarify the separation of the uses here and the measures that are undertaken to ensure that we have two separate and distinct businesses here prior to our closing the public hearing?
Yes, thank you. So there would be measures taken. As mentioned, they do have to abide by a very stringent state security requirements for those back rooms for storage unit, or excuse me, for units B and C. As far as keeping those blocked off, only employees for those units would have access, as shown with those keypads on the doors to those units, as well as access to that entrance door off of the parking lot. And so I do believe that the applicant would be going through great lengths to abide by those security measures and see that Unit A is only accessed through that front entrance off of Black Oak. And then further, this conditional use permit does specify which uses could be operated out of each unit. And should the applicant want to make any changes to those in the future, it would have to come back via site plan review, which would go to the Development Review Committee. At which time we would determine if there's any further security needed or any additional measures to be taken at that point to convert that Unit A use back to the medical cannabis delivery. So, I hope that helps.
Okay, thank you. That helped. Thank you, Lori. I believe it was also noted in the staff report, and let me know if I'm incorrect, Lori, that there have been really no complaints that have occurred as a result of the operation of this business in units B and C since its inception.
That's correct. We haven't received any complaints on either one of those units.
Okay, thank you. With that, seeing there's no additional members of the public to comment, we will close the public hearing and take this item back to the Planning Commission. At this point in time, discussion by the Planning Commissioners. I will start kind of on the other end perhaps, and let's start with Commissioner Davis.
I'm curious when staff made their recommendations, if they included any interface with law enforcement. I know, Lori, you said that, I guess this is more of a question, that there hadn't been any instances related to units B and C, a highly regulated business. Did the police department have an opportunity to review this? I know they did the first round back in 2019.
Yes, they did. We were reviewing this quite closely as well with, at the time was Chief Lewis, assisted us with a review of this project. I know that the applicant also had them out on site to visit the site and get a better feel for the internal operation of it as well. And they've confirmed for us that they haven't had or experienced any complaints or concerns over this site or business as a whole. And they've also assisted with the, just to add, they also assisted with the conditions that were added with the amendment to this use permit that you see tonight.
Thank you, Larry. That's helpful. And I think it was Ty that was mentioning the enforcement. That was kind of a question that I had in my mind. So I appreciate, Lori, that piece of information. So that's all I have. I'll let the rest of the commissioners comment.
Thank you. Commissioner Jorgensen, comments, questions?
Yes, I agree with you, Chairman Kogler, that it is not the responsibility or even the area of the Planning Commission's purview to create a design solution for how to separate what evidently need to be public restrooms from the secure hallway. And I don't suggest that we do, but I would find it very important to have in our resolution that those shall not be accessible to the secure hallway. Other than that, I think I'm pretty clear on the request, and I think I could be supportive of it if that was clarified.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure we can take that into account should we move to approve a resolution on this item. Mr. Covarrubias.
You know, I just thought of something right now, and I apologize for repeating this again or addressing this. The access to the restrooms. I understand that public restroom has to be made available. Ms. Hall, will the restroom from the outside be locked where it would need a key access, or will it just be open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.? I'd like some clarity on that real fast, please.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question? I had to unmute myself and it blocked you out for a short time.
The restroom access from the outside of the building. If you remove the access from the common area, which is I think all of my fellow commissioners are suggesting, and you just have access from the outside, is the access to that facility, the restroom, is it going to have a lock on it where somebody has to access it by key so that you can be selective in who goes in and out of those restrooms? Or is it going to be open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m.?
No, we would be selective and there would be a keypad entry, just as pretty much similar to the doors on the pictures that I sent. I'm not going to just allow anybody to come in and use the restroom, so it would have to be by keypad.
Okay, and that's from the outside?
Yes, that would be from the outside.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I don't have any other questions.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Neal, any discussion points?
Not for me, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Christensen.
I don't have any at this time. Thank you.
Okay, and I think all of the items that I had have been addressed, and I think as Commissioner Jorgensen stated, the one item that I think we should assure is part of any resolution that occurs is dealing with this access to the hall and the restroom access being property remedied consistent with code.
Excuse me, can I ask a question?
Certainly.
I cut out when, as far as the time, it cut out when it said Monday through Friday. What is the exact hours on there that was listed of the hours of operation?
Well, I think the biggest clarification was rather than 5 days a week, it's 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And Lori, help me with the hours that are referenced, if you would, Lori. I'm looking for them.
Yes, to clarify, staff's understanding or intention was that the use permit authorized them to operate 7 days a week from the hours that they indicated on the application.
Which, would you
So,
please restate those?
Oh, sorry. So from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., 7 days a week, not just Monday through Friday.
Okay.
That's what it's conditioned as.
Is that consistent with your thinking, Ms. Hall?
Yes, I understand that that's what the conditional use permit allows for the delivery. So, well, that's the state licensing. We were only allowed to be open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. I wanted to know if there would be any consideration where if we could be open until possibly midnight with the casino there, they're open late, and I'd like to be able to tap into those customers along with sometimes there with the fair and things like that. But if the commission could consider that, please.
So just to reiterate, Lori, the hours that were requested were those put forward by the applicant. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and now you were requesting Ms. Hall to change those hours on, tell me which days specifically, and was it to midnight in lieu of 10 p.m.?
Yes, if it could be 6 a.m. to 12 a.m., 7 days a week, if that would be a possibility for Unit A. If it's not, because it has to do with the conditional use permit with the whole building, then I understand.
Okay, and I just a quick question for Isaac. I don't think the hours are tied to any aspect of the CUP and the fact that we have A unit, B unit, and C unit. Is that correct? Would we, if we were so inclined to be able to modify those hours, could we do so as a part of an action that we would take this evening?
Yes, I don't see an issue with the commission's ability to amend the hours as part of the requested amendment here for the convenience retail use out of Unit A.
Okay, very good, thank you. I think we'll see if anybody among us would like to put forward a resolution, or approval of a resolution on this, and I'll leave it up to you as to what you want to do with the hours, because that'll put it on the table for discussion. I think we're looking at resolutions to approve the conditional use permit subject to site-specific conditions of approval.
Chairperson
Commissioner Kogler, may I
Commissioner-
ask a question before?
Yes, yes,
this
absolutely.
is Commissioner Jorgensen. May I ask a question on that matter
Yes, please do.
before you entertain a motion? I'd like to ask of staff. My understanding is that the police department reviewed this with the condition that the hours would be 6 to 10, not 6 to 12. Is that true? And were the hours part of their review and consideration?
When the emergency services or police did review this with us, it was proposed at that time that the hours of operation would be from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. So that was what they had approved.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Neal, were you going to put forward a resolution that we might talk about?
I was. I'd like to move approval of draft resolution A, approving conditional use permit amendment 21-02, subject to site-specific conditions of approval as recommended. And I would like to add a provision providing access to the public to the restrooms behind Unit A, while restricting access to the general public to the common hallway.
Okay, we have a motion, and that motion would make one change as noted regarding the restroom access, but it would leave the hours from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. We have a second.
I'll second that motion. This is Commissioner Jorgensen.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion.
I was just wondering if a better word would be for customers rather than to the public. Just a thought, because I think it's for the retail purpose.
I am comfortable with that.
As am I.
Okay, we'll assume a change of terms there. Other questions on the motion? Commissioner Covarrubias, any?
No other questions, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Christensen,
I have none.
Commissioner Davis,
No more questions.
and Commissioner Jorgensen.
Nope.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and the motion would be consistent with Resolution A as was worded in our packet information, with the one addition on the access to the restrooms, and the way it stands now would leave the hours from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. since that was the subject of the public safety review that occurred as a part of the review of this proposal. We have a motion and a second. I would ask staff to call the roll.
Commissioner Neal,
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias,
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen,
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
And just as a parting clarification, should there be any further interest in the future of modifying the hours and or the other discussion we had on the sale of tobacco products, that could be brought forward as a separate action. So with that, we will move on to our second public hearing of the evening. It's for Plan Development PD 21-19/P21-0008. The project is 3445 Park Street, APN 008-041-042. And the applicant is Scott Stokes. We have a staff report, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Kugler. This is Lori Wilson again, Assistant City Planner, and I'll be taking us through our second item tonight. As mentioned, this is a planned development project for 3445 Park Street Apartments. The site's located on a 0.26 acre lot at the north end of Park Street. It is in our T4 NC zone, which is part of the Uptown Town Center specific plan. The lot sits just behind the Spanish Oaks apartment building. There's also a couple of photos on the right side of your screen there showing the lots. The first one on the top there looking north to an additional multifamily building. And then the one that you see below you is looking to the rear property line, so towards those Spanish Oaks apartments. So the project before you tonight is a request to construct a 3-story multifamily building. The applicant is proposing 17 one-bedroom units. All the units would be kept below 600 square feet. So with that, they are requesting to utilize both the fractional density, being that which offers each unit to be counted as half a unit when they're kept below certain thresholds, so that's 600 square feet. And they are also going to be utilizing a density bonus by offering one very low income unit. So what those two different calculations do will essentially bring this project from having 8 base units, which is what's allowed by the base zoning for this lot, to have the ability to construct up to 20 units. Again, though the applicant is requesting to construct 17. Staff wanted to mention as well that with the very low income unit that they're providing, this project does fall under both the Housing Accountability Act as well as the state density bonus law. So both of these indicate that the project can essentially only be disapproved if it would have a specific adverse impact on public health and safety. In addition, there are development standard waivers that can be requested as part of the density bonus law. And the city basically can not grant those should it have an adverse impact on public health and safety. So staff did review this project with the Emergency Services Department, as well as our city engineer. Our recommendation is to approve the project and the applicant's requested waivers. We do not believe that the project creates a specific or adverse impact to health and safety. The modifications that this project is going to be requesting is as follows. The first is in regards to building massing. So typically the zoning code here would require that the third story be no larger than 50% of the floor area of the first and second. They're proposing 100% floor area ratio. The parking, as you'll see here in a moment on the site plan, is in the zone required to be located on the rear half of the lot. And they are proposing it to be just a 4-foot setback from Park Street. In regards to the rear yard setback, the zone requires a 15-foot rear yard setback, and they're proposing a 2-foot 4-inch setback. And then lastly, in regards to the shared open space. So 3 out of 5 units, as I understand it, will fall short of the required overall 150 square foot open space requirements. However, they do provide private balconies that meet standard size requirements for balconies. So this project did come before the DRC on 2 different occasions. After the first DRC meeting, DRC asked the applicant to go back and make some design changes that would essentially bring the building into compliance with being a warehouse industrial design. They asked to see modifications made to the railings on the decks to essentially just kind of hide clutter that you may see, come up after people live there for some time. DRC wanted to see additional information to ensure that they're providing enough interior closet space that the code requires. There was a lot of discussion on the rear setback and making sure that there was some sort of, if there was any way to redesign the building to make some sort of space on the rear side just to be able to maintain the building. And then lastly, if on the rear property line, along the 3rd story, there was kind of a large blank facade on that wall there, if there was any way to break that up. So the applicant came back with a redesign, addressed all of DRC comments, adding metal siding throughout the building, increased the roof pitch, added accent panels to those front elevations. And then the proposal on that rear property line, which you see on the right on the west facade is what faces those Spanish Oaks apartments, is to add that trellis there that you see to break up that what was previously just a large blank wall. In regards to storage analysis, the applicant is providing, what the code requires is 250 cubic feet of enclosed storage space. And that's in addition to what you would typically provide with your standard closet. So the way that the applicant's proposing to meet that requirement is providing 100 cubic feet of storage space off of the deck, and then additional closet space in the interior in addition to what they would typically provide for a standard closet. So the site plan for the project before us tonight, they are providing adequate parking for the project. The code requires 1 space per 1-bedroom unit. So they have 17 spaces shown there. Entrance to the different apartment units are entrance through that open courtyard that you see on the kind of towards the top left of the site plan. I can certainly bring this back up as we discuss it and help assist with any questions. So the options before the commission tonight would be to adopt draft resolution A, approving plan development 21-19, recommend approval with project modifications, refer back to staff for additional analysis, or deny the project by adopting findings of denial. The staff would like to note that as part of the amendment to the agenda for tonight, there was a couple of conditions that were removed from the engineering conditions. Basically, the applicant had already satisfied those as part of the initial site plan review, so they just did not apply. And then emergency services also had an update to their standard conditions of approval, so those were replaced as well. That concludes staff's presentation, and we do have Mr. Stokes on the line to assist with any questions as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Mr. Stokes, is there any presentation that you would like to provide at all prior to assisting with some questions that we may have?
Can you hear me? This is Jessie Skidmore.
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. Scott was unable to get the meetings to load up. So he's actually watching on YouTube. Okay. But this is Jessie Skidmore, the architect on the project. So I would be happy to answer questions as well. I think I think most of you have actually seen this project already at the DRC level. So I didn't want to get into too much of a doubling up on the explanation. Lori did an awesome job. But we did have in our project summary, if anybody hadn't seen it, we had some examples of what would this project have looked like if we were able to put the parking at the rear of the property. And one thing to note in this area is that a lot of the other properties in this zone have alley access, which is where a lot of that rear parking location language comes from, and we didn't have that. So what you're seeing in front of you is a balance of getting as close to the full density as we could, and also providing the adequate parking with it. So this is the most efficient parking layout to then provide a maximum number of units. And then one other item to note, the area where we really encroach into the rear setback, which is on the top left of this plan, that's our stair tower. And we could have pulled that mass in where the open courtyard area is, just to the bottom right of that area. But we were trying to balance everything. We're trying to balance having some open courtyard for some common space, making sure everybody had some private balcony as well, where they could put a plant out or something out to dry. So we took that rear space to open up towards the south, and that's why we ended up encroaching into that area. So I'm here to answer questions, and I will try to text Scott if anything comes up that's very owner specific. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. For the record, would you please identify your address too? We just need that as part of the record of the meeting.
Address.
Firm address would be fine.
Oh, 10 Over Studio at 539 Marsh Street.
Thank you. Okay. Questions of the commission for staff. Let's start with Commissioner Christensen.
I was part of the DRC. Yes, I did see this before. I like a lot of the changes. I just had a question for staff. So on the trellising on the staircasing, I'm glad that they came up with something for that, because I think that can look really nice. Is there a specific measurement to those? I would love to see that they are going to be that tall, even though that might be a little difficult to maintain with the setback, which I had a concern with in DRC. But it does look really nice. But I would hate to see this on the drawing and then some small, real kind of pathetic trellis show up at the final build. So is there what's on the plan here? Is that something that would, do we have a measurement on the height of that? And would that be a requirement as part of this particular design?
And hopefully we have a measurement provided on the plans as we see now, but perhaps Ms. Skidmore, could you assist with that question? How this measurement that you believe, or excuse me, that you propose for those to be?
Sure. I mean, I think it makes sense that we would get up to that third floor level at the very least. That's where we would be most likely tying in for structural reasons. So if we needed to call out a certain height, we could do that, because we would plan to match this.
I don't think it's necessary to call out a specific height. I just wanted to hear, and I appreciate it very much that you guys came up with that for the added design, because I think if I'm in the neighboring building and what I'm looking at, is going to look a lot better than just a flat wall. So I do appreciate that. And if it's close to that, that seems like it's very tall. It looks very nice. So that's the only questions I have for staff right now. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Neal.
I too was on DRC and don't have any questions at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Covarrubias.
I was also on the second go around of DRC, and just more of a positive comment to Jesse and the team. Very nice looking building, I think. I think you've done a great job in meeting all the requests. Visually, I think it's a really attractive looking building. So kudos for that. No, I have no other questions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jorgensen.
Thank you. I was on the first DRC, and yes, I appreciate the response to our comments very much. I do have a reality question, though. On the trellises that we were just talking about, they're shown as being landscaped, and I'd like to know perhaps how your landscape architect plans on doing that. I don't know that that's real. So are they really just going to be a wood? I assume it's wood, maybe metal grid? Or is it
Yes.
really landscape like this is showing? And how's that going to work on the third floor?
I would imagine
2.5 feet in front of it.
Sorry. They can be they can stand off about 4 inches and still put climbing vines on them. So I think what we really have to pay attention to is how low they'll go. Is, that they'll have to drop low enough to actually grab the vines from their original height when we plant them in the ground. But they can climb up with a 4-inch offset.
3 stories?
I would have to, that was what the landscape architect was intending. I would have to get more information on what type of vine that would be.
Okay, I just don't think it's, I'm not a landscape architect by any stretch of the imagination or even knowledgeable in that area, but I just don't see this as a real rendering, and that's my only concern. The trellises look fine. I just don't think it's planting it is real, and so I want to be sure what we're approving. So that's my question.
Okay, any other questions, Commissioner Jorgensen?
No, that's
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Davis.
Hi, hard to unmute at times. I too was on DRC and saw this and saw the different iterations. I do think that the applicant has done a lot to make it a more aesthetically pleasing development. I think they've done a great job. I had the same question, Roberta, what vine could grow that tall? But I do like the trellis look, even if the vine can't quite work like that. I think the balconies look great. I think you've done a great job. Thank you.
Okay, very good. I think I'm the only person who wasn't on DRC when this came before us, or at least almost so. I don't have a lot of questions. I think it's a really nicely designed little project. It's a very intense development. And I do have I think the project is great. I think the affordable housing component is wonderful. I like the architecture of the building. So don't construe my question to be running afoul of any of that. But I do have a question for staff about approval of projects of this nature. In the staff report, there's a reference, item number 11 on page 28, that talks about cities must grant waivers and variances to development standards that have the effect of physically precluding the construction of an affordable housing development. What was presented as part of the staff report, we heard the words health and safety. And what I was inferring from that is there have to be health and or safety issues in order for the city to say no to this type of project. And my question, again, not reflecting this project, but where within this does the city have the ability to say no if it is an affordable housing project, but maybe it doesn't have quite as many units? Does the city ever have the ability to say no, or are our hands tied on most everything regarding this kind of proposal?
So Commissioner Kogler, Warren Frace, we did work with the city attorney, not Isaac, but another city attorney on this. And I think, it's clear that the state is very interested in encouraging affordable housing, and they've basically written these kind of waiver requirements in favor of the developer to receive these sorts of waivers. So the threshold for the city to actually deny them is fairly high. So it would have to be a true kind of life safety, public safety kind of thing that you would have to make true findings for to deny that. So short of that, the city is fairly limited in terms of not granting those sorts of waivers in general.
Okay, thank you. And again, I was not arguing at all that we deny this one, but in taking a pretty good look at the site plan, this is a really tight development, and it's one that kind of everything has to work perfectly in order for it to work. For example, the parking spaces have 16 feet of depth, and they pull another 2 feet from the overhang above the curb, which leaves 1.9 feet left, 21 inches for people to actually walk across the entire face of this building. And I think that's just one indication of how tight everything is on this site. And, you know, as again, I said, it's fine. If Commissioner Gibson was here, he seems like he frequently will talk about the size of his Ford pickup. And taking that into mind, I looked, Ford pickups range from 17.8 to 20.3 feet long. And not that everybody that lives here has one of those, but it just is indicative of, again, that this is really tight with tight maneuvering areas and everything else. It works on paper. It'll work most of the time in the field. But it is a situation where kind of every square inch of this property is used. So again, that was just my question pertaining more to the size, scope, density of these kind of projects and what freedom we have or don't have to comment that things should be as proposed or that things should be modified. And I understand where that stands now. I don't have any further questions at this time. Any other commissioners have come up with any questions as the rest of us have been talking? Now would be the time to air those. Otherwise, we'll open the public hearing. Hearing none, let's open the public hearing on this item. Let me look. I don't think in the queue I have, Jessica, there's an indication of anybody calling in. Is that correct?
No, sir, we don't have any callers.
All right, thank you. That being the case, we'll close the public hearing and we'll turn it back to the Planning Commission for any discussion, any points that you would like to make. And we'll go down the line again. Let's start with Commissioner Jorgensen first.
Okay, thank you. I shared your concerned comment, Chairman Kogler, about kind of the reality of all this bidding. It's just a shared concern. I don't intend to vote against the project because of it, but I guess it's you know, almost more of a comment for future to staff and to applicants and designers, architects and engineers to, you know, this building will be here for decades and decades, and more than working on, needs to be more than just working on paper. And I just have some concerns. I think that the dimensions you mentioned are accurately optimistic. The landscape, I don't see, and maybe I'm missing it, but I don't see a landscape plan in here, which we typically receive. Did I miss it with the species and size of the plantings and so on? I may have missed it. If there is not one, I think I would like to see that in our conditions of approval to be approved by staff. I don't think we need to come back to DRC. But since that's one of our standard requests for a illustrative color landscape plan, I'd like staff to be able to review that. And that's it. Those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. There was a landscape plan submitted, sheet L1.0, which does have species and some size notations. And I had missed that the first time through too. I just rediscovered that. I was looking back through the packet right now. So I think that piece is there, but we could ask staff certainly to make sure that that meets all of the interests and approvals that we have.
Yeah, and it's reality based. Thank you. Yes, I see that now. Thank you.
Sorry, my microphone was muted now. Commissioner Covarrubias, any further discussion points on this one?
Thank you. Yeah, no further questions. Just, I guess, another comment only. And I think my fellow commissioners have heard me say this before. This is a very tight project, good-looking project, very tight. I also know that the parking, and I brought this up in DRC, I brought it up in other meetings with similar projects. I get that the applicant has met the requirements for parking. One of the parkings being handicap, which is great. In my, just a comment, just a personal view, it just seems like with these projects, we keep forcing parking onto our streets. And at some point, at some time, I just personally feel like this has got to be something that we have to address. We keep approving these projects with the minimum required parking element, and the reality is, if it's a husband and wife, 2 vehicles, we just keep driving more and more cars onto our roadways for parking. So I just felt like, again, I had to kind of reiterate that that's just a personal feeling that I think I've vetted since day one. So, but outside of that, a tight project, but a good-looking project, I will say that. So, no further questions or comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Neal, any comments that you would wish to make?
Just the one on the planting of the trellis. I am in favor of not planting that trellis because I do not believe that those vines could be maintained in the future, because the setback is so little, especially going up 3 stories. And I made that suggestion in DRC, but it's just a suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Christensen.
Just wanted a couple things. Really wanted to reiterate, one of my first items that I brought up in DRC was, the tightness of this project. Because of what Commissioner Neal just pointed out, there are areas it's going to be hard to maintain, which is, I think, obvious to everyone. And then secondary, I have to wholeheartedly agree with Commissioner Covarrubias. At some point in time, we really have to address the fact that we're just creating and pushing more and more parking onto the streets. And I can't imagine that that's good for the neighborhood in a lot of ways, and probably doesn't make a lot of neighbors very happy. That being said, on this project, it's not like we have much choice, but I do have to say I like the way that they came back with the changes. I do like the idea of trying to make the trellis work in some way, something to break that building side up. If staff has another recommendation for that, I'm all ears, but I do believe that it would be wonderful that the people next door don't have to stare at a giant 3-story blank wall. If we do something there, I would recommend that we maybe have the applicant, and this can, in my view, could go through staff, but that it gets put onto the planting plan, as Commissioner Jorgensen was kind of looking for earlier and brought up, and I brought the plan up, and so I wanted to point out that is not on the plan. So that may be something that staff may want to go back and take a look at or require from the applicant. That being said, I don't think I have any other comments at this point in time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chairperson Kovler, could staff jump in and clarify just quickly on the landscape plan?
Sure, go right ahead.
Yeah, so just a quick clarification reminder. So just to confirm, we did get the landscape plan from the applicant as Exhibit D, and then there's a standard condition that be reviewed along with the building permit. So staff can certainly review what's proposed for the trellis to make sure that that's realistic and added to the landscape plan as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that clarification. Mr. Davis, any other discussion points?
Nope, nothing else. Thank you.
And I don't have any either. So would anybody like to provide a motion on this? I think it needs to reflect per what Katie sent us, amended Exhibit A, which is site-specific conditions, part of Attachment 3, and amended Exhibit B, which is Attachment 3, standard conditions of approval. Anybody wish to offer a motion on this?
I'll give it a whirl. Commissioner
Neal.
Thank you. I move approval of draft resolution A, approving plan development 21-19, including an affordable housing density bonus, fractional density, and modifications to the Uptown Center specific plan, including those amendments to the site-specific conditions of approval and standard conditions of approval.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
This is Commissioner Covarrubias. I'll second.
A motion from Commissioner Neal, second from Commissioner Covarrubias. Any further discussion by the commission? If not, I would ask staff to please call the vote.
Commissioner Neal?
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias,
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen,
Aye.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen,
Aye.
Chairperson Kobler.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have our last public hearing of the evening. It's for plan development and conditional use permit for Quickie Car Wash, P21-03, CUP 21-11, P21-0027. The applicant is Hamish Marshall, and the project is located at 2110 Spring Street. Staff report, please.
Yes, Chairman Kogler, members of the commission, this is Darren Nash, city planner. I've been working with George Garcia, the architect on this project, along with the owner, Hamish Marshall, on a site here in Paso Robles for quite some time trying to find an appropriate site. What's before you tonight is a proposal by the architect and owner for the vacant site at the 2210 Spring Street. So this is the site of this is a site of what used to be the A&W drive-up restaurant here. And for those of you that have been some around Paso Robles sometime, that was a bummer that that restaurant was removed so long ago, and this seemed vacant because we sure could have used that restaurant throughout the past few years. So anyway, with this project, it's a redevelopment of the site into the Quickie Car Wash. You can see the photo above you there, the corner of 21st and Spring Street. This is looking at the existing conditions, vacant. When this project was the A&W project, it was developed with asphalt and buildings pretty much property line to property line. So the whole project had been covered with development. There is a large oak tree down near the alley, at the corner of the alley and 21st Street. That tree is being protected with this project. So the zoning on this Spring Street lot is TC2 in the Uptown Town Center specific plan. Car wash use are permitted with a conditional use permit. As I mentioned, the site was previously the A&W drive-up restaurant. There's an oak tree on the site. With the review of the conditional use permit, the whole intent is to consider a use and consider its impacts on neighboring uses. Along Spring Street here, we've got the Scolari's grocery store across Spring Street. We've got a commercial, little strip commercial to the south. We've got another commercial, multi-tenant commercial to the north. And then we have the alley to the east. And then there is some commercial along with some residential on the east. So to help us give you the information that the commission needs to determine consistency, we did do a noise study. So Paul Ballard and Associates did a noise study. Ballard and Associates did our most recent noise ordinance. So Mr. Ballard is on the line tonight if there's questions about noise. But early in the process of this project, Mr. Garcia designed the project to make sure that noise was designed and mitigated. Mr. Marshall has various Quickie car washes around the county, so they are familiar with ordinances and noise and trying to be compatible with the uses. So they're familiar with that. The project that is before you tonight has gone through quite a few changes. This project went to the DRC on 2 separate occasions. There was some concern with the initial architecture and consistency with the specific plan. So the architecture has been updated to what you've seen here and what the DRC saw at their last time they looked at it. Generally, the project has been lowered in height from the original. There was some residential units above the centrally located car wash building that have been removed because there was some concern with the mixed use and residential component mixed with the car wash. So the applicants removed those. The site plan was changed to accommodate the tree. Initially, when this project came in, there was a request to remove that oak tree. Staff brought up the concern with that, and the project was designed to incorporate the tree along with an arborist report with that as well. There is also a sound barrier designed for the property line along the alley. So that was evaluated with the noise study. Some changes were made to ensure that there was the metal panels on both sides of the barrier as opposed to just one as originally proposed. So the project has been reviewed by the noise consultant, and along with the design changes, verification that it could comply with the noise ordinance given the manufacturer's information that's been given on the equipment and the vacuums and the blowers and all those criteria. So here's a site plan of the project. This project, it's in the Uptown Town Center specific plan, Tc2 zone. So the car wash itself is centrally located. The buildings are centrally located. But to provide a project along Spring Street that has a building fronting and oriented towards the street and kind of also screen the equipment and the other buildings and the car wash lanes from the Spring Street view, not specifically a requirement of the specific plan, but would help meet the visual and architectural suggestions of the specific plan. So the commercial building along the Spring Street frontage was designed with this project. This is the oak at the alley and at the corner of the site. And just to back up here, when this came through to DRC initially, there was some questions on the project. There was also a couple different options that the architect provided to get some clarification. One of them omitted the commercial retail building at the back of the sidewalk and just had the car wash building more centrally located, and then the car wash lanes between the car wash and the street. That was reviewed at the DRC along with a site plan similar to this one you see tonight with the retail building. The DRC suggested to move forward with the commercial building at the front towards Spring Street. So this was reviewed at a DRC level, and then the architecture, that agrarian style, different from the original stucco tile, more of a Spanish style that was originally approved. Those came out of the DRC to give direction for the plans you see here tonight. So with that, George Garcia, the architect, has a PowerPoint presentation that he's going to run through. That'll get more specific into the actual building, site planning, architecture, and he can kind of explain how the project's been designed, how they are used to trying to design the projects in a manner that have the less noise pollution off the site as possible. And with that, I'll have George give you a rundown of the project, and then I will follow it up with the options for the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Darren. Mr. Garcia, please proceed.
Thank you. Can you folks hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure to be back in front of the Planning Commission and Paso Robles. It's been a while. I want to thank the staff report that Darren just provided. Darren, thank you very much. As he mentioned, this project has gone to DRC twice previously. We initially submitted an application early in the year, with the goal of following the standard procedure, presenting a preliminary project to DRC, getting feedback from the various departments, and hopefully coming back with something that has been not only refined, but has hit all the salient points and received a lot of feedback from various members of city staff. As Darren mentioned, the applicant, Hamish Marshall with Quickie Car Wash, we've actually been looking for a appropriate site in the city of Paso for probably 3.5, 4 years now. Submitted various things, worked with staff on a couple of different sites. None of them really had a lot of traction. This site became available and had checked a lot of the boxes that were required. And but knowing that it was going to be a bit of a design challenge to come up with a project that would not only meet the Tc2 zoning, but would also be something that the city would not only just approve, but hopefully be excited about. So as Darren mentioned, we went to DRC looking initially at what I'd call a Spanish revival vernacular that we took out of the Tc2, looking to really, in a sense, cloak the car wash use, which is sort of removed from the Spring Street frontage, and in front there put a more, I'd call pedestrian-oriented type building and a use. So in getting feedback from DRC, not only on some site planning options, but on architecture as well, we kind of went back and retooled the project to pretty much what you see now. So I'll go quickly through the presentation. If Darren can kind of click through, I have a few additional renderings where you talk some specifics about the oak tree and some of the other site constraints, and then answer any questions at the end. So here's the site. You're all familiar with it. I think those of us that have been around enough still bemoan the loss of the old A&W. Those of us with kids remember pulling in and having them sit in the car, but alas, enough nostalgia. Life moves on. So the site is, again, as Darren mentioned, zoned for the uses, with the exception of the car wash, which simply requires a CUP. One of the things that we heard loud and clear from DRC, and I commend them for giving us sort of marching orders, was to sort of step back from the Spanish revival sort of architecture. And while that was allowed as one of the vernacular styles in the TC zoning, perhaps looking at something more what I'd consider indigenous to North County or Paso. So I did a quick survey, as any good design steward would do, looking at vernacular in terms of existing buildings, existing context, right across the street. Well, with all due respect to Darren, it's a Smart and Final. I do remember it being a Scolaris back in the day, but again, time moves on. But generally, we're seeing some of the images here of buildings that are surrounding the property very much in an agrarian style, as well as a new building coming up on the kitty corner, which is the one in the upper right corner of Frogtown tasting room, I believe. So again, looking at these in terms of building shapes, as well as materiality and what could we extract from that. So Darren, if you want to click to the next slide. And again, looking at the material palette, literally kind of picking and choosing some of the things from the various buildings surrounding this property up and down Spring Street, and then coming out with a palette that we think would be more reflective of what I'm calling a neo or modern agrarian vernacular. So we can move through the rest of the slides. So this is the current site plan. The one in the staff report was just one version older rather. Nothing much has changed other than we've added a required sound wall along the alley, which is kind of the darker line that you can see between the edge of the property on the top of the page and the alley. I've also added the root protection zone. We worked closely with Greenvale and to come up with a tree protection plan. Obviously, initially, we wanted to maximize parking. As I heard from previous projects, parking is key, and I get that, and I completely agree. So we tried to make sure we had adequate parking, but also trying to weigh that with the needs to protect oak trees. So working with Greenvale, we came up with a protection plan. You can see the existing tree as well as the outside root protection zone, in which we're basically not going to be doing any hard improvements other than some paving, which we'll do with pavers and sort of best practices when working in the root zone of the oak tree. I guess we move to the next slide. So I heard before illustrative landscape plan. I truly believe in those because I think they tell quite a bit of story. So
Here's the illustrative landscape plan. You can see we've got quite a bit of planting along the frontage, which I think is going to be important. We really hope that this, even though it's a car wash, automotive-oriented type use in the back, the front building, we're hoping that there's a restaurant and a tasting room, which again would excite the sidewalk for pedestrian use. Also enhancing that with additional landscaping. We can kind of quickly go through the elevations. Again, we're looking at a kind of a agrarian industrial palette for the entire project. Go through the next one. This is the view from the alley, a little more utilitarian. But the canopies that you see there, the kind of darkened areas, those are actually shade canopies that will receive solar panels. All of the applicants' car washes, of which this will be the fourth in the county, are all either have solar power or are going to receive them shortly. And this is the view from Spring Street. So we can keep going. I just have a couple other refresh renderings. So again, this is the view from the intersection of 21st and Spring. You can see the car wash project in the background, but again, noting that we want to put our best foot forward along the street frontage. This is an attempt to kind of come up with a typical agrarian shed, but sort of erode the corner a bit to, again, excite the corner, provide some interest, as well as some pedestrian interaction there with perhaps an outdoor seating area if this ends up being a restaurant or some sort of retail. And this is the view still on Spring Street, but now looking back towards town, towards the downtown. And yeah, I think I've got one more. Yeah, so this is on 21st Street, now looking back into the project on the left. The darker building, again, is the retail. It's one story. That was one comment I think we heard from DRC a couple times, concerned about the height. So I think our maximum height to the roof, a usable roof, is about 27 feet, which would be the front building. The car wash is quite a bit lower. And so we want to be sensitive to the height comments that we received at DRC. And I think with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Let's move into the portion of this item where planning commissioners do have an opportunity to pose questions to staff. Oh, excuse me, Darren, you wanted to go back and pick up some additional report items. Let's do that before we move into questions.
Great, thank you. Just a reminder that part of the addendum that went out to the Planning Commission included the standard conditions of approval. I missed putting that in the initial agenda, so we're going to add those tonight with the standard conditions. There was one site-specific condition that the city engineer wanted to add related to some traffic information. And then there was a public comment that we received on the project from I believe a neighboring property owner down on 21st Street. Those were just some comments. Be happy to answer questions from the commission as well.
Let's move into that segment. Commissioner Davis, any questions of staff or the project representatives?
Yeah, I have a couple actually, and I did see it on one occasion at DRC, so I'm familiar with the project. Darren, maybe you could explain the wall, the noise barrier, the materials and height of that a little bit more?
Yes, and we'll go switch back to the other PowerPoint. There's a detail of the so this is the detail of the sound barrier. There'll be a short retaining wall along that eastern property line, and then a 6-foot tall, which really ends up being a fence. The fence with the materials shown, as you see on the blue note there, the request or the condition would be that corrugated metal, which is going to match from the building materials to this fence with this sound barrier, be put on both sides. So the noise consultant reviewed these materials, and this was actually a more favorable product than an actual block wall, which was originally proposed. So that is what's being proposed. As you can see here, it's basically showing the height with the material, but the condition in the use permit is that the final details come back for staff to review. I'd like to see kind of a decorative cap or something on the top, kind of see what's happening on the seams, just get a little more detail on the fence sound wall than what is shown here, with the intent being that it be architectural materials and colors that would match the buildings.
Okay, yeah, and I'm just responding to the letter that came in about noise and concern about noise and constant noise. So are you suggesting, Darren, that this material is known in the industry to buffer that kind of sound?
Yes, and I know our noise consultant is available. Maybe I'll have Mr. Ballard of Ballard and Associates kind of just answer that question, kind of give his thoughts on the positioning of the barrier as well as the materials.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, good evening. Am I unmuted?
You are, Paul.
Unmuted, and we can hear you.
Thank you, Darren. Good evening, commissioners. And to answer the question, the sound wall is specifically required for the vacuum section of the car wash project. The vacuum motors are actually going to be enclosed within an equipment room. The vacuums, the ends, the hoses actually do generate some noise, and we actually traveled down to the Quickie Car Wash in San Luis Obispo to get reference noise level data for the vacuum units. And we did some sophisticated three-dimensional modeling, and we concluded that the car wash dryers are been selected and designed such that they're not going to present an issue, but the vacuums were potentially going to exceed the city's noise standards. And we determined that a 6-foot barrier along a portion of the eastern site boundary would be sufficient to ensure satisfaction with the city's noise standards. The material would provide adequate sound attenuation, being that it's metal and it's going to be on both sides. We did look at, the different material options. You don't need a masonry wall in order to provide enough sound attenuation. The only sound that anyone would hear on the other side of the alley would be sound coming over the top of the wall, which is what you want, not sound coming through the wall. So the material that the wall is proposed to be constructed of would ensure that situation. I hope I answered your question, but if not, I'd be happy to elaborate.
No, thank you for that elaboration. I appreciate that very much. My second question, Darren, maybe a little bit more on the water treatment, any conservation measures I don't know car washes, but could you comment on the water treatment?
Yeah, actually, I'll defer to George Garcia on that question, just to explain their process, their equipment that they have. And I think that that's beneficial to them in terms of water use, just as much as it is the city. So I'll have the architect respond on that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Darren. So all modern car washes, I would say the ones that we've done, at least for the past, 10 years, are required to have a water reclamation and a recycling system. The idea there is that since it is the washes are effectively occurring inside an enclosed tunnel, we have an opportunity to recapture and reclaim as much of that water as possible. What happens inside the tunnel, if you've been in these types of car washes where you actually stay in the car and you're kind of pulled along with the trolley, there's a large trench down the middle of the car wash. All of the wash water goes into the trench and is captured. Efficiency depends on the system, but we're running and are seeing efficiencies anywhere from about 80 to 85% recapture. So again, for every gallon that is used to wash a car, 85% of that can be recaptured. It's reclaimed. It's put into a triple rinse filtration tank, which are basically tanks right next to the car wash in the parking lot. The water is then filtered and cleaned and then put back into the wash system. So these car washes that we're doing today are very efficient in terms of reclamation. And really the only loss that we see is the incidental water from the undercarriage that sometimes comes, leaves with the car that you'll see at the end of the tunnel. But again, most of these are extremely efficient. This will be one state of the art where we're reclaiming 80 to 85% of the wash water.
All right, thank you. And I bet you've received water questions in the past, so I appreciate that. My last question, Darren, and then I want my fellow commissioners to ask a few, but if Field Gibson was here and he's driving his Ford pickup truck, I think I asked this at DRC, will he easily be able to make that hard right turn for large vehicles to get queued up? From a circulation standpoint, I'd like to talk to you about that.
George, why don't you answer that and to kind of explain the radiuses as well as how this facility can accommodate larger vehicles?
Yes. Well, again, this is the fourth one we've done for the same client. And for the record, he does drive a Ford F-150 and uses his own facility. So you can imagine that question is number one on his mind whenever we start putting pen to paper. Some of the earlier designs that we did years ago, we used the kind of industry standards for drive-through lanes because there really isn't a whole lot difference between a Starbucks drive-through lane or a fast food or one of these type facilities. The minimum radius that we tend to look at is 12 feet, so a 12-foot inside diameter radius, for left or right turns. Historically was the standard. However, over time, and especially in San Luis Obispo County, we do see a lot of larger vehicles, especially trucks. And so we've actually expanded our thought on that. And now that the minimum radius that we try and look at is a 15-foot radius, which is fairly generous. Again, if you go through a Starbucks of any size or shape, you're probably going to see a 12-foot radius turns and whatnot. But here you can see, and they're labeled on the site plan, most of them are 15 feet, if not more. And also plenty of what we call straighten out space in front of the tunnel. So when you do have a larger vehicle, such as a truck or a dually, there's enough room for them to maneuver and straighten out their vehicle so that they can align with the little trolley and be pulled through the tunnel. And as well as in the exit, you can see on this site plan, very generous 12-foot lane width is, again, in a drive-through lane, typically they're 10 or 11 feet wide. We like to do at least, minimum 12 feet, if not wider. Again, we want to make it comfortable for the customer to be able to get in the tunnel as well as navigate out. And you can see the exit is very generous coming around the curve there. And then they can either leave the site if they don't want to vacuum, or they can pull into one of the vacuum spots quite easily.
Yeah, I think my question was mostly coming in off of Spring Street. And correct me if I'm wrong, if you are coming in with a large vehicle and making that hard right turn, you can go over to that left-hand lane and have a larger turning area. Is that correct?
That is correct. So yes, to answer that specific question, let's just say the worst case scenario, you'd be coming, heading north. So you're downtown heading towards Flamson, and you're going to come in making a right turn, essentially making a U-turn. So the building itself, the commercial building, is 20 feet. We've got a little landscape space in front. And then there is, I believe, a 12-foot sidewalk / planter parkway. So adding all that together, that's about 32 feet of an inside radius. And as I mentioned, 15 is our minimum. So 30 would be a logical U-turn for a larger truck to make it. But yes, to answer the question, if somebody had a very, very large truck, they could easily make that double right-hand turn, if you would, and end up in the far lane and simply go through the kiosk and pay and be on their way.
All right, thank you. And if you could just ensure that commercial could have the hamburgers like A&W, that would be great. I am a local and I remember the A&W. So thank you. That's all I have.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. Commissioner Covarrubias, questions?
Thank you very much. First off, really appreciate all the efforts to meet some of the DRC feedback. I think the building looks great. I think removing the residential component was big. I think it just brings the whole property together. I was on the second DRC, so well done on that. Just a clarity question, because again, sound seems to be probably at least one of the top two concerns. Looking at the site plan here, am I to understand that the sound wall, I understand that it's 6 feet in height, is up at the very top? Is that going to be the length of the sound wall? So it's going to run all the way along that alley? Is that accurate?
Yes, so looking at the site plan here on the screen, the dashed darker line across along the alley. So it's going to go all the way from the northerly point along around the trash enclosure, go all the way down the eastern line to the south, and then turn in right before underneath the drip line of the oak tree.
Under the drip line, got it. Okay. Okay, thank you for that clarity. Believe it or not, that's the only question I had at this time. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you. Mr. Neal, questions?
No questions.
None. Mr. Christensen, questions?
I just had, one for the city engineer, Mr. Athey. Do we, or maybe Darren can answer this too, do we have a time frame for that stoplight? And the reason I ask is I'm very concerned with the traffic at that intersection. It's gotten propensely, it's gotten a lot worse recently. I think there's been a couple pedestrian accidents down there in the past couple of years. I know because my office's building is just a couple blocks up the street. But do we have an idea on that stoplight? Is there a plan from the city for that by any chance? Do we have a time frame?
Hi, Commissioner. This is David Athey, city engineer. At this time, we don't have a time frame. This project is set up so that they will produce a what we call a warrant analysis, so a detailed look at the intersection, considering a number of different factors, 12-hour traffic counts, safety, accidents, operations, and how it would operate with the 24th Street signal. So 6 to 8 months after this opens and we have a really good idea of traffic patterns around this area, they're required to conduct an analysis and provide that to the engineering department. At that point, we'll take a look at that with our city traffic engineer, Central Coast Traffic Consulting, or Transportation Consulting, and really start looking at programming it, or have an idea of when we'll need the signal at this location, and then start to work with the city manager and the finance department on timing and for installation if it's warranted. But at this time, we don't have a hard date.
Okay, well, that's good to know that will trigger something. And to be honest, I know that the auto traffic count has picked up, but I'm just saying, I think my biggest concern is the pedestrian traffic right there. Seems to be a major crossing with the grocery store and stuff now. So thank you. That's a great explanation. I appreciate that very much. I don't have one last question for Mr. Nash. Is there a way we can make it a requirement that they have to serve French burgers and crinkle fries in memory of A&W root beer? I'm just kidding. All right. Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. Mr. Jorgensen, questions?
I don't have any questions. I was on both DRCs. And I just really want to thank Mr. Marshall and Mr. Garcia for working with us as a team and really listening to what we had to say, carefully, really listening, because I watched them. Well, maybe I didn't watch, but I could hear them responding clearly that they were paying a lot of attention to our comments, and the results and the design convey that as well. And I do appreciate their respect for the unique culture of Paso Robles and how it does differ from the rest of San Luis Obispo County. So I know that's kind of high praise, but I was pretty impressed by how this project evolution was handled. So I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And I too was on one of the DRCs. I think it was DRC2 on this one, and share the comments that were just offered about the design and the fit to the community. I think it's very well done. Just have a couple of straightforward questions. I'm curious, how many employees will be on site for the car wash at any given point in time? Is it ever fully automated? Is there always somebody there?
I can answer that. I don't know if the applicant's on the line. Typically, well, to answer the question, yes, somebody is always there, even though it is an automated car wash. Typically, you're going to have a site manager. You'll have probably an attendant at the what's called the pay kiosk. And typically, you'll have one or two other employees in or near the tunnel, typically to make sure everything is working as it should. And if something should come up, that they can, flip the switch or direct folks which way to go. So at a minimum, there's always at least, I believe, 2 employees, sometimes up to 4, depending on weekends. Peak time, there's usually more employees versus a Tuesday midday. There would be less traffic. So.
Okay, thank you. I had trouble syncing the information in the staff report regarding parking with the site plan. Staff report indicates 12 parking spaces along with an additional 14 car wash vacuum spaces. I count 12 vacuum spaces and 9 spaces. Am I missing something? Where are the rest of the parking spaces? Or help me sort that out.
George, if you want to run down your site plan and the parking for Mr. Gobler.
Sure. So we're in the Tc2 zoning, which again, the form-based codes do not really talk about uses as much as parking based on square footage. So the requirement for commercial in this zone is 1 space per 400. So taking the front building, which is about just a little over 2,000 square feet, the car wash kiosk, and the car wash building itself as a whole, adding up the square footage divided by 400, the total parking requirement for this project was 13 spaces in total. And the number of spaces, if you count up, that we're actually providing, including the vacuuming, because again, the only time a car wash patron would park is if they're actually pulling into a back spot and spending 5-10 minutes vacuuming the car. So adding all the parking on site that is available, we actually have 26 spaces. So what's that, almost 200% in excess. That said, we wanted to make sure that we segregated, or not necessarily segregated, but had enough parking if the front building ended up being a restaurant, for example, that, gosh, heaven forbid, that did provide hamburgers and crinkle fries. We wanted to make sure that that could stand alone in terms of parking. So again, back to the multiple DRC site plan iterations, this one I think actually ended up being the best solution, because we do have, in fact, 9 spaces up front for the commercial building, which really only requires a little over 5, again, because of its size. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question in terms of a quick parking summary and how we arrived at the parking solution that we did.
It helps, but you mentioned 26 a moment ago. Are you counting some of the queued area as parking spaces? Because again, just simply looking at the site plan, there's 21 total spaces.
Well, this is not the correct site plan. Yeah, I think this is one iteration back.
George, we're going to bring up your PowerPoint and bring up the site plan.
Okay. I think maybe to answer the question, regardless, we definitely do not count queue area as parking. Those lines are always moving, so we would never count those as required parking spaces.
Well, I believe the site plan that's on the screen now is the one that we received in our packets.
Yeah, that is correct. So yeah, it looks like there was a math error. I'm counting 21 total spaces.
Yeah, it looks like 21 on this site plan, George.
Okay, that's fine. It's above the minimum thresholds we were dealing with. I just couldn't make the math work, and I wondered what I was missing, and I was curious as to whether or not queue spacing was counted as parking spaces, but that's fine. That explains that adequately.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about the retail building, and I know you can't answer this, but what assurances do we have that that really will ever happen? And if it's 2 years, 3 years, 5 years into the future, what happens to that space in the interim? How is it treated from a landscape perspective?
Well, our intent is to build the project. There was never any discussion about phasing, for example. And Darren, you can jump in here, but my understanding is this is a conditional use permitted project, which I believe obligates us to build the project that we're presenting. If we had submitted, for example, a phase plan, which sometimes you do for larger projects, that would be something else. But I believe the owner has every intention of building out the entire project that we're presenting tonight at one time.
Perfect. That was right, as that was distributed prior to the meeting electronically. The queue also shows individual John Singh. I don't know if John is, and it indicates perhaps potentially part of the applicant group.
Yeah, he's the general manager for Quickie.
Okay. Does he wish to present any information?
No, I just wanted to be on just in case there was some questions that need to be answered, typical to the car wash, but George did such an excellent job. So I'm good. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. So I don't have record, Jessica, of anybody else from the public wishing to comment on this. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Great. Thank you. Given that fact, we will close the public hearing and bring this item back to the Planning Commission. We can kind of quickly maybe go through any other discussion points on this, leading us up presumably to a motion. Since this has had DRC review by most of us, I think I'll just ask the commission generally, are there any other discussion points anybody would raise prior to a motion being put forward? Hearing none, I think we are ready. If someone would like to offer a motion on this, as was noted in the addendum to the agenda, there was an addition of Exhibit A1 of Attachment 3, which is the standard conditions of approval and the public comment that I noted earlier. Would anybody like to offer a motion?
Well, I guess I will as soon as I can get to it.
We'll be patient.
This is Joel. I move approval of draft resolution A, recommending approval of plan development 21-03 and conditional use permit 21-22, subject to site-specific conditions of approval, including those items included in the addendum to the staff report.
Thank you. We have a motion for Commissioner Neal. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second from Commissioner Davis. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask staff to please call the question.
Commissioner Neal.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias.
Aye.
Commissioner Christensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, that concludes our public hearings for this evening.
Thank you.
And our next item on the agenda is a discussion item by staff. It's the Comprehensive Zoning Code Update Study Session to provide direction for any recommended additions or changes to the current summary of comments pertaining to the code. Staff report on this or staff summary of this?
Good evening, commissioners. This is Darcy Delgado, Associate Planner. So just to give you a little bit of background on this, staff has retained MIG to help us with updating the zoning code. And we've really just barely dipped our toes in and kicked this off. And so one of the initial stages with this update was getting input from the community. And so now that some of that initial legwork has been done, we really wanted to provide the information to the Planning Commission and then get some feedback on any additional comments that you might have. And so, so really, I'm going to be turning it over to Laura Stetson with MIG, but just that's pretty much the short version of it. But she's going to dive into it quite a bit more. The presentation can be interactive if the commission desires to kind of take pauses throughout and ask questions, but there's certainly going to be plenty of time to ask questions. And we really hope that you did your homework over the weekend and were able to kind of thumb through the zoning code. So with that, I'm going to introduce Laura Stetson. She's with MIG. And she also has her associate Alfonso, who will be helping to take notes tonight.
Thank you, Darcy. And Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, thank you very much. This is Laura Stetson from MIG. For some reason, I cannot get my sharing on for my videos. So if you don't mind a disembodied voice speaking to you this evening, that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. And Mr. Chairman, I wanted to make sure that the share screen is working and you can see the PowerPoint presentation.
It is working, and truthfully, we are a bunch of disembodied voices anyway, so you fit right in.
Okay, good. I'm happy to join the crowd. We're very pleased to come to Paso Robles and work with your staff on updating the zoning code. As some of you may remember, we worked with you on the housing element update, and some of the initiatives coming out of the housing element update include updating provisions of the zoning code to implement some very important housing policy. But more than that, the focus is to bring the zoning code into the 21st century and to update it to make it more user-friendly and to get rid of any internal inconsistencies and really give Paso Robles a mechanism to use the zoning code as an economic development tool. And so with that, I'm going to get underway with the presentation this evening. We will review the objectives for the code update. We will talk to you about what we've heard so far through a series of stakeholder interviews. But foremost, we want to hear your ideas for how the code can be updated to achieve important objectives for Paso Robles. Something that I want to mention before we discuss the details is that if you haven't had a chance tonight to really dig into the zoning code and come up with your wish list of things that you'd like to change, the Planning Commission can email comments to staff at any time. There's no timeline for doing that. We welcome any ideas, all ideas throughout the process. It's just important to remember that not to copy other planning commissioners if you do send a message to staff, but we would welcome those comments. And then at the end, I'm going to ask a question again of how else the Planning Commission would like to be involved as we move through this process. This is the only study session that's currently on the agenda for the work program, but we do have 5 HCOC meetings at which 2 Planning Commissioners will attend. But I think if you feel like you'd like additional study sessions or anything else that can help you contribute to this update process, that is absolutely something that can be done. Just let Darcy know, and we can make that happen. So the key objectives for the code update are to make it, as I've said, a 21st century document. There are things in the code today that make it a very cumbersome document. It's something that not you, the Planning Commission, but collectively the city has added to over time. So things are never stripped out, they're always added on. And so what happens is sometimes there are inconsistencies that come in. The code doesn't necessarily adjust to modern times. I think as you can see from what we've circled on your use matrix, there's just a lot of detail that's probably not there. And it was just serendipitous that we focused on car washes and detailing tonight. But we've said that there's just more detail in here than you probably need. I've worked on a lot of zoning codes in my 30 plus years in planning, and I thought I had seen the worst, least organized code when I had worked in Garden Grove, but I have to say that Paso Robles is equally difficult to use. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff in there, but you need to know what you're looking for. And so in order to get the code to work well, it needs to be better organized. So that's something that we'll concentrate on. There's just an exquisite and level of detail on everything. I was particularly struck by section 2113.030, that has very specific conditions attached to single properties in the city. So there are things that say, notwithstanding whatever else this code says on this property, this is what you have to do. And so we want to make sure that these things are still valid, that they're implementable, and there are things that the city wants to move forward with. I mean, if any of you have dug into the code, you know that there are about 6 or 7 or 8 pages of this similar level of detail. Our first task will be to create an organizational structure that's intuitive, user-friendly, and compact. And I'm going to come back to this in just a second after we give you the overview. As I mentioned, we want to make sure that the code is internally consistent, that all of the additions over the years can be resolved, and we can come back to what is exactly the essence of what needs to be in the code. We want to create flexible, modern land use regulations, things that group things a little bit better than the example that I showed you previously. And so we're going to take your existing land use chart and update it to make it reflect modern uses and things that can be flexible over time. The code currently has some tables, some graphics, but it would certainly benefit from many more illustrations and presentation of materials that give you a quick at a glance and allow for easy comparisons. There have been advancements in case law and law at the legislative level in California that need to be addressed. The one that we've shown here is that there was a very important case a number of years ago in 2014 regarding signage and temporary signage. And so we need to make sure that your sign code is what we call content neutral. It's a free speech protection issue. So we'll be working with your city attorney to make sure it passes muster in that regard. As I mentioned at the outset, there are programs in the housing element that need to make sure are implemented via zoning code provisions, and including streamlined housing entitlement processes to comply with the Housing Accountability Act and some more recent state laws that have occurred to streamline housing entitlement and get housing built in California. There are a couple of bills that are on the governor's desk as he's gnashing his way through the election this evening that may affect this even further as to how housing needs to be treated in your zoning regulations. This project will also involve a minor adjustment to the Uptown Center specific plan to extend boundaries. When we were doing our stakeholder interviews, there were a number of other comments that were made with regard to making adjustments to the specific plan. That is not on the work program at this point in time, but those are things that staff can share with you at a later date and put on a to-do list. And critically, this entire process will involve stakeholder involvement. We have already done a series of interviews with people who build in the community, who own property in the community, and we want to share with you this evening some of the key things that they've said. And we'll continue to go back and check in with people to make sure that we are implementing things that will work for them and work for the city at the same time. The timeline for the process is to update the code by the winter of 2023. And you might think, well, that's a long time away. We'll see what we can do to speed that up. But updating the code is a process that requires quite a bit of attention to detail. We're kicking it off really tonight with you to find out what your desires are for the code update. We will be taking that information and drafting sections of the code and reviewing them with staff through the fall of next year. As I mentioned, if the Planning Commission wants an opportunity to weigh in at different points, we can entertain that. At this point, there is only one additional study session once the code has been put together in its new form. And then we'll go through the hearing process in the winter of 2023, meaning early January 2023. We won't wait till the end of March. We will have meetings with the Housing Constraints and Opportunities Committee to test ideas, to make sure that that options are headed in the right direction, and that there are solutions to issues that have been identified through the process, and that we continue to hear about the proper direction to take on those. So let me talk to you about how we propose a code structure. There's kind of a natural way that a modern code falls into the structure. It answers four key questions for members of the public and the development community. The first is, what is my property zoned? What can I do with my property? How may I develop it? And what are the processes, the permits that I need to do that? So that's the way we propose structuring the code: the what, the how, and the processes. And currently, your code jumps back and forth among all of these things. It's repetitive, and by structuring it in this way, it will reduce the propensity for inconsistencies to creep in over time. It makes it much easier for somebody who doesn't understand codes to find what they need to find in the code, so that you can see that most of the things that people are going to be looking at are in what we call Articles 2, 3, and 4. Where is it allowed? What are my development standards? What are the parking and sign regulations? And landscaping would be in Article 3. And then Article 4, for example, consolidates all of those specific regulations for uses like perhaps service stations or animal keeping, or things that really apply to all zones citywide. So it's all in one place. And then all the terms and definitions would go at the end of the code. Right now, the code has terms and definitions spread throughout it because there have been specific ordinances that have been introduced over time, and the definitions have just been embedded in those ordinances rather than put into a comprehensive definition section. So that's the proposed structure. In parallel with the work that we're doing on the comprehensive code update, the city is moving forward with an accessory dwelling unit ordinance to reflect current state law, a density bonus ordinance also to reflect revisions to laws that have come up within the last couple of years. And finally, objective design standards. This is something that I'm sure your staff has talked to you previously. All of these will be folded into the code update that we are currently working on, but they will be moving at a more accelerated pace so that you can deal with those. And then once they're adopted, we'll just put them where they belong within the new code structure. So let's review what we've heard through our discussions with what we've called the stakeholders in the community. Foremost, to a person, they said the code needs to be friendlier. It needs to be easier to navigate, particularly on in fact, the way everybody looks at it these days is on the online version of the code. Finding information needs to be more intuitive. Sure, you can type something in the search function, but it's much more easy to use if it's better organized. So we heard that loud and clear. People have said the use table needs to be modernized and simplified. And so that's certainly something that we will do as we've shown you. Kind of an outline comment, somebody said that the live work needs to be an allowable use. We'll work with staff and the commission to look at other things that need to be adjusted in the use table as well. So nothing is set in stone right now as to what should be an allowable use versus a conditional use or regulated in some other manner. We're going to be looking holistically and comprehensively at how uses are regulated in Paso Robles. For development standards, people had said that the definitions of development standards need to be clarified. A very important comment is that they have said that the 40-foot 3-story height limit can be a constraint to development, particularly if you're doing a mixed-use project and you've got a higher floor plate on the ground floor that may be commercial. So maybe if the height is raised to 45 feet with no discussion of, is it 3 or 4 stories or 2 stories, that would provide a little bit more flexibility, recognizing that 4 stories may be an okay development approach within the town center. There was discussion also about the importance of the interface between single-family development, existing single-family, and any new multifamily that might come in. So be sensitive to shade, shadow, and privacy on any adjacent single-family lot. The requirement for open space currently in the code for new multifamily residential is 300 square feet. There's a formula that allows you to translate, additional common space to open space, but developers had said that this is higher than the norm within the Central Coast communities, and so they asked that we take a look at that. There are requirements in the code today that require articulation of buildings, of a facade, to break up a facade. Some architects felt that those don't really make sense, and that's something that should probably be addressed through the objective design standards. People were supportive of a fractional approach to determining density. That's something that you do today. You had a project this evening that addressed that. So that's something that was given a thumbs up. I think that code amendment was made, Darcy, I think in the late last year. Maybe it was before that. There was something else discussed tonight with regard to the project about storage for individual units. Some architects and developers felt that the 200 cubic feet of required storage space is too much, and it should be allowed to be, whatever it is, it should be allowed to be spread throughout a development. And so we'll take a look at that. Parking. People felt that the parking regulations were not onerous, that they were on par with what the market is demanding, and pretty much in line with what other communities up and down the Central Coast are requiring. So no complaints about parking, which surprised me. We usually hear concerns about parking requirements. So let's switch to processing. People love developing in Paso Robles. They said it's a straightforward process. Staff is great. They're friendly, easy to work with. And there doesn't need to be too many tweaks in the processes, other than the fact that we need to ensure that code interpretations are not diverging depending on which planner you ask. And so that, that comes back to the clarity of the regulations. With regard to fees, people did not protest too much with regard to fees. I think you've done a great job over the last many years adjusting your fees to make sure that they fund exactly what's needed and they're not stymieing development. We asked what market trends are out there that we need to account for in the zoning code, recognizing that trends do shift over time, but something that developers felt might not change is that with not just coming out of COVID, but just generally the trends that people are looking for in a house because people are working more at home is to provide space in homes to have a fourth bedroom and to make or some space for an office to make sure that doesn't count against any parking requirements. That the design that's required account for affordability by design, that not too many onerous provisions are put on single family and multifamily and mixed use projects that put them out of price for moderate income and lower income households. The last bullet point here is something that is very common that we hear in mixed use projects is that the ground floor, what's called the floor plate or the distance from floor to ceiling. Your chain merchants are looking for a higher floor plate, whereas local businesses want something a little bit lower. And so make sure that the floor plate is not set at a height that makes it difficult for local businesses to come into the city and to establish those businesses. So some flexibility so that ground floor can accommodate whomever wants to set up business in Paso Robles. We talked to your code enforcement staff. They've got a really hard job of making sure that everything lives up to the city's high standards, and they do a darn good job of it. We asked, what can we do to make your job easier? They said, make sure the language is clear, particularly with regard to parking. They also suggested that any violation of the zoning regulations or other municipal code be reduced to something that's a much more minor type of infraction in the city, so that it's easier for people to fix it and not have to go through a protracted code compliance process. Really good insights from talking to code enforcement. There was a lot of discussion about objective design standards. This is something that MIG's not addressing, as I've said, this is a parallel process that's moving along much more quickly. And so we would ask that staff and the Planning Commission and HCOC take a hard look at all of the suggestions that are made with regard to objective design standards, so they not stymie design, but provide the certainty that developers are looking for if they want to have a streamlined process for housing development. These are regulations that would apply to multifamily housing and any mixed-use project that has at least a 2/3 residential component, that there be things beyond simply height, setbacks, yard requirements, parking, that it address things like site design, building articulation, roof treatments, building materials, all of those types of things. Lastly, with regard to the Uptown Center specific plan, these are things that we are not addressing currently other than making adjustments to the boundaries, but there were some requests to revisit the Uptown specific plan and tweak it so it's a little bit more straightforward with regard to some of the overlays and maybe including some additional project or some additional property within the Uptown specific plan area to capture more multifamily housing. So with that, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission, we'd like to turn it to you with two key questions that we have. Are there things that vex you with regard to your zoning code that you'd like to address as part of this project? What are those topics? What provisions in particular would you like to change? And as I've mentioned, you might not have them all at your fingertips this evening, but take notes as you're reviewing projects over the next many months. If you're diving into the code, the review projects, if there are things that you think could be clarified, let Darcy know and we'll get those into the queue. And so I will turn it back to you, and I am going to stop screen sharing so that my colleague, Alfonso Ramirez, can take notes and let you see that we're taking notes. So with that, Darcy, I'm trying to figure out how to unshare. I think I've got it. I'm kind of a Teams neophyte here, but I think I've got it squared away. So Alfonso, if you could share, and Mr. Chairman, however you'd like to run the rest of this meeting, we are here to answer your questions and take detailed notes.
Very good. Thank you. Darcy, did you want to say anything before we move into this discussion?
No, I think that we're ready to hear from the commission.
Okay.
Great job, Laura. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. Laura, would you just again highlight the two questions verbally that you had on the screen a minute ago, just as reminders for us?
The first, and they're related, are there additional topics you'd like us to consider as part of the code update? And are there specific pieces of the code that you'd like to change? So generally topics, and then more detailed for people who are detail oriented, can you give us chapter and verse of things that you think just don't work that we need to revise?
Sure, great, thank you. You asked how we might like to conduct this session, and my answer would be all of us around a table, because it's a lot more effective and iterative, I think, when those discussions can occur, but we're back in the mode of doing the best we can electronically. I would also remind folks, and you mentioned it, that both Commissioner Neal and myself sit on the HCOC, and so we have been through this, and we've had an opportunity to actually probably suggest some of the things that are on the information that we received earlier. And we can come back later to talk about whether we would like to add additional study sessions as a full planning commission or how we might like to handle that. So the fact that we're not around a physical table, but we're around this electronic table probably leads me to go back to the mode of saying, let's kind of go down the line commissioner by commissioner and offer comments that we might have, and perhaps those will become a little bit more discussion, or at least have an opportunity to state what those might be. So with that, I would ask Commissioner Jorgensen if you would like to lead us off with some input on this overall endeavor.
Yes, thank you. I've been frantically writing notes as you've been speaking, so I've got a number of points, so I apologize in advance. It'll probably take a while. And they are probably not in a real logical order. So bear with me, please. First of all, just a comment, no answer required. I certainly support the Planning Commission having more study sessions and hopefully dedicated ones, not that start at 9 o'clock at night after we're already tired. So yes, please, for Planning Commission dedicated study sessions. Probably my biggest question here is who are these people? I heard people said, developers said, somebody said, who are these people and how are they selected?
Darcy, you want me to take that?
Darcy.
Thanks.
I can help it. So we invited, I want to say 20 or so individuals and or firms that work regularly with the city that have had projects, recently, but then over, the last few years. And so we just really kind of made it really broad, knowing that we would probably get a smaller group that would respond back. And so it was a little bit of a mixture. We had anyone from, who's just a draftsman, to an architect, to I believe we had a couple civil engineers, builders, and then of course we had code enforcement. So Laura might elaborate on that more, but that was the goal was just to say who would like to participate and provide us information. And so we had a handful respond back, and so that's how we got our group.
And Commissioner Jorgensen, what we've found in doing zoning code updates is it's a much more technical exercise than doing a policy plan or a housing element or a specific plan. And the general public usually doesn't know how to weigh in or doesn't want to weigh in. And so the primary target audience is people who use the code. Certainly the public will be able to participate through venues like this. But to get to the nitty gritty, we've found that it works most effectively to talk to architects, developers, major property owners, people who really understand zoning, as well as enforcement staff.
Okay, that makes sense, and I appreciate that, but it still sounds, I'm sorry to say it this way, it sounds extremely secretive and extremely, insider oriented. And that's a concern to me, since I still don't know who any of these people are and who else may have been nice to have their opinions. So I'm concerned about that as we go on. I know this is purely the beginning. I appreciate that fully. But this is a process question. As we go on, I think this needs to be a lot more transparent because I'm uncomfortable already. So as we go on, please, let's try and be more transparent. Because I'm an architect, so I would be in that crowd if in a different place, in a different life. But our collective opinions are based on a certain point of view of the world, and not the exclusive view of those of Paso Robles. So anyway, process for as we go on. Who will be developing this parallel and faster moving objective design standard document?
So this is Darcy again. So we are working with SWCA to update those 3 sections of our zoning ordinance. So two of the updates will follow closely with state law. The one that will take a little bit more effort is the objective design standards. So those 3 updates will be done under a separate through separate consultant. But as Laura mentioned, that those will happen sooner. We do have some timelines in our housing element to update the ADU ordinance and the density bonus ordinance, I think within a year of adoption or of our housing element. So those should be coming back to the Planning Commission. I would say later this year.
Okay, and Darcy, will they be coming back to the Planning Commission just once when they're all done, or will we have any review after they're substantively drafted but not finished before they're finalized?
So I think because the ADU ordinance and density bonus ordinance were mostly following state law, I'm not sure if there's going to need to be any issues vetted out with the Planning Commission. Certainly, we've relied on the HCOC in the past, and we anticipate needing a little bit more involvement from them for objective design standards. And, you know, we could, if there was a desire for there to be like a study session ahead of a public hearing, you know, we can always look into that as well.
Okay, I would encourage that. Thank you. I heard a couple of times mentioned that norms for other Central Coast communities are being reviewed for Paso Robles, and I certainly understand that, you know, we have to have a basis to start from for modification. Appreciate that fully, but I just want to comment, kind of like we just talked about on the Quickie car wash. Paso's norms are not necessarily those of San Luis Obispo or any place else. And so I just want to be cautious. I totally get having a place to start, but then let's not just say, well, everybody else is doing it, so we're going to do it too. So I just ask, I encourage caution on that. And then another question for staff. And this sounds, I guess this is a really dumb question, and I guess I'm supposed to know this, having been a planning commissioner for a number of years now, but who's Paso Robles code enforcement staff?
Yes, we have the community services officers. We have one, Ren Patnode is our main person who does code enforcement.
And code enforcement, are those officers work through the police department?
Okay, so I appreciate that. I mean, it seems like there's obviously a whole bunch of different kinds of codes that need to be enforced. So there's a variety of different kinds, but I would encourage, as we're looking at zoning enforcement, I saw was one of the sections, or at least was a piece of one of the proposed sections for the new zoning code document, which I am fully behind and encourage, because I think we need to be really careful as we're rewriting this to be consistent in how we enforce our code between all of the neighborhoods of our city, to make sure it's equitable economically and socially. And that's not, and I'm not saying that for when projects are submitted to the city and we're reviewing them. I have absolute faith that that goes well and as it should. I'm talking about things like bootleg projects, signage without approvals, changes to what was approved years, you know, something that could have been there for many years, but is not being enforced as other projects that are in the center of town. That's where the tourists see it. I just have a concern that we need somehow to put in our zoning code an emphasis on equitability between all neighborhoods of this city for after development enforcement. If we don't, you know, we have proliferation of blight that is very concerning when it's in one place and not really noticed when it's in another place. So I don't know how that happens. I'm just at this early stage just saying things that concern me about Paso Robles, and hopefully that's something that we can make better in this zoning code. Let me look, I may be close to done here. I think lastly, I just want to be sure that we, as we're looking through all this, have rational basis for changes. One of the examples that was given, and I know this is just an example for explanation purposes, so please don't take this as a specific criticism, but one of these people, who I don't know who they were, said that we need to have a 45-foot height limit instead of a 40-foot height limit for some category. I don't even remember what. But why? I mean, I just want us to have a rational basis. That may be an excellent suggestion. I have no idea. But rather than we were asked to do it as a rationale, I think we need to know specifically why we are doing it. So I think that's it. I am excited that we're doing this. And I'm also excited and hopeful that the Planning Commission will be actively involved. And I will pull out my gigantic binder of the zoning code and start doing my homework and send comments to Darcy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Jorgensen. Very insightful comments. Commissioner Neal.
Yeah, I guess the zoning code probably is one of the most esoteric documents ever written. And people don't really care about it until they figure out they can't do something they want to do. So I guess I can understand how difficult it would be to get the general public involved, but I do think it's probably worth a try. I think I do need to do much more homework, and I think the major comment I have is that if we can ease the navigation of the zoning ordinance, it would be hugely appreciated. I think I've tried to find many things through the zoning ordinance, and it does take some hunting and maybe even a little subjective reading of some of the requirements. So that's really my only comment this evening.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Covarrubias.
Thank you. Yeah, interesting. This is going to definitely be a long, interesting process. Some of the things that kind of stuck out really quick, and I'll make this really short. Laura addressed, I think one of the comments she made with regards to the code is, I believe how she said it, and if I misinterpreted, please correct me, but I believe you said something about people want to know the what, the how, and the process. And I agree with Commissioner Jorgensen. Adding the why, I think, is one of the things that we lack significantly in this entire zoning code document. So many times, even as commissioners, we ask so many times, why? Why is it this? Why is it that? And I'll use parking as an example. Surprised to hear that parking wasn't something on your list of insights, that parking wasn't something that that sometimes caused confusion or conversation. So I'm just going to throw out a couple of words because I also admittedly need to do my homework. I need to really dig into this. It is complex. It is overbearing. I agree that it's difficult to find something when you're trying to find something. So I'm just going to throw out some words that I'd like to see when we think about restructuring this. Simplify, consistency, transparency, definitely the why thing of, why do we do certain things? I am in agreement that I think study sessions would be good. I think we also need to really consider whose feedback we're gaining. When you do a project of this magnitude, we have to be very selective because Paso is a unique town. We are different. I know people want to argue that sometimes that don't live in our city. I've been in this city since 1980, and I've seen so much change and so much things, and we have yet to lose the core of our city, the downtown feel, small town feel. Pro-growth is good, home development is good, all these things are great. But I do think that there are certainly things that need to be updated. And as we go through this process, we can't lose what is the core of Paso Robles. And that's important to me as a commissioner and as somebody who's lived here now a number of years. So I need to do my homework. I'm happy to do that. And if I have any questions or comments, it sounds like I can email Darcy and start giving her some feedback. But I would welcome the opportunity to gather as groups and do some study sessions to make sure that by the time this is done, we're all proud of the end result and can stand by it. So with that, I look forward to doing some homework.
Thank you. Mr. Christensen.
Thank you. One question for staff. Would this include, zoning, like a zoning map overlay, changes in that to include different zoning areas? For example, if something's zoned one way now, would that include a change in zoning it to another type use?
This is Darren. So
Go ahead.
I'm just going to say that the rewrite of the zoning code is the zoning code itself. There aren't any specific map changes along with this zoning code rewrite. So we're not proposing to change any zoning on specific properties.
Okay, so zoning overlays though would be important factors. Would you say that would be correct?
So the current zoning map with the existing overlays, there aren't any proposed changes there, but I think, as Laura mentioned, the zoning code doesn't do a good job in speaking of the different overlays and how things are developed within them, what they mean, those kind of things.
Okay, yeah, and I would agree with that. Thank you. I appreciate that explanation. So that would be a poignant issue for me, is that I think that is a key factor. And I don't want to take too long with this either, because I've got a lot more homework to dig into this, and I know it's late for everybody. But one of the things that Commissioner Jorgensen brought up was the code enforcement. And one of the things I've always felt, and it got mentioned tonight by Commissioner Covarrubias in questioning, is I would love to see more of a process, and I'll just throw that term out there. That's just an important process, I think, just in general, to cover variations of that code enforcement, whether it comes to various CUPs that we approve, or down to the basic enforcement issues. I think that would truly help, maybe help define, the things that Commissioner Jorgensen was talking about. And if I'm incorrect with that, maybe she can correct me. But I think I'm going to throw out some key phrases that you can use in your notes, and maybe this will help. I would definitely say ease of navigation is very important. And that correlates over to website access and the way that it functions on our site. I think process, simplicity, accessibility, again, back to the overlays, and some flexibility for staff and planning commission and the city to be able to deal with certain issues at certain times. Tonight's example of the apartment complex, I agree. I love that, the building, I think the housing is important for our town, but at the same time, I don't think that we, even though we're being mandated in so many ways, should give up things like, I do think parking is an issue. I don't think we should push cars onto the street, for example. So those things become a facet in a small scale to, obviously as much larger issues. I definitely would love the study groups. I think that's a great idea. And I really think we should definitely give time to bring in more people from this area, from this town, whether it's professionals or the public, and have a much broader mix of viewpoints. And I get it, you guys, staff, I'm sure you were limited by who you could get to actually come in. And I understand that. I know people get busy, but if there was one thing I would say is maybe how can we give that more time? How can we make that a better process? Does that involve us? And I'm happy to be involved in trying to get that input from people. So that being said, I'll let it stand there, and I look forward to the study groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Christensen. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with a lot of the comments that my fellow commissioners have made, and especially the one that struck me as who are the stakeholders. I think that was a great question that Commissioner Jorgensen asked. I do think if this is folded out, I think I heard you say winter of 2023, we have plenty of time to be more inclusive. I agree with Ty. I think if you add a broader public, you ask a broader public, parking matters. You ask the broader public, do they want 4 stories in Paso Robles? Well, a developer might have a little different opinion than maybe a community member. So I do think it's important. And it's hard to reach that group because some people don't even know what a zoning is. So I respect the fact that you have a starting point, but I do think we need to be as inclusive as possible with some of these topics. I heard some great things in terms of better organization, making it user-friendly. One thing I just wanted to highlight, anytime we have an opportunity to put a graphic or an illustration to explain maybe a design standard more, I think is a good idea. So I'm very, very happy that we have this grant and that we have this focus. I look forward to participating, but maybe not at this late hour. So I look forward to future study sessions. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments on my part, because I indicated I have had a chance to contribute some on the HCOC. I also spent about 4 decades of my professional life as a planner, landscape architect, and city planning director. So I've lived and breathed zoning for a really long time. And Laura, would wholeheartedly agree with the statement that you made that, let's just be positive, Paso Robles ordinance is not the best organized ordinance I've ever tried to read either. So it needs help. I think it's a very interesting time and has been so for quite a while, because these days and of recent days, you can actually prepare ordinances that are really intended to be read, used in a user-friendly online format. Gives you far greater ability through links to link to graphics, to link to photos, even to link to videos that can make the ordinance more user-friendly and more understandable to people as a whole. I think there's going to be a big challenge on public engagement. It's easy to say public engagement, but truthfully, the technical aspects of a zoning code are not the kind of thing that people are terribly interested in usually, nor necessarily qualified. Not to diminish the interest and the need we have to get opinions on design matters and things that matter to people in the form of a community and what people like, and we can structure and work within those to come up with a code that hopefully reflects some of that. Study sessions, I think, for the commission will be great, will be necessary. I would like to see those address both the design standard component, not necessarily the requirements by the state, but those where we have a choice. There's a lot of the commissioners participate in that, and certainly in the zoning code as well. So I think this is a great opportunity for the city to come up with a code structure that works far better than that exists today, and really kind of helps advance the ideals and design standards this community holds near and dear to its heart. So this is going to be a great exercise as we have going forward for the next year and a half, roughly, or whatever that time frame is. And I assume it'll truthfully take every minute of that to get there. So I'm a bit of a zoning geek, but I'm excited about getting into this. I think it's something that the city has long needed, and I think all of the dominoes are kind of lined up to knock them over in the right sequence. So I am excited, and I commend the work that's been done to date, and look forward going to into the time in the future with meetings with this group and other groups we have to kind of pull this together. That's all I have to offer. Any other commissioners come up with any other last closing thoughts or comments on this?
This is Commissioner Christensen. One thing popped into my mind I meant to say earlier. I would love to see that there's a clearer interpretation, and no offense, and I'm sure that Darren could attest to the many questions he's gotten from me in the past years. Being in real estate, I get tons of questions and then I throw them his way. Instead of waiting for an interpretation back from a planner, it'd be nice to have something a little more clear and concise that an owner or a potential user can actually address themselves. And I think we all talked about that in so many ways. And I think that would really save planners a lot of time. And so that's just one thing I just remembered to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman Kogler, this is Darren, just kind of to tag along what Commissioner Christensen's indicating, as my input into with MIG, with the other staff, is really putting the shoes on of the people using the zoning code, and I really think whoever made the comment, I think it might have been Ty, about the web-based, it really comes down to, I'm a property owner and I want to do a certain thing. how the zoning code is organized, how it then interprets to the web base, so folks can really find the information they're looking for. And it starts in the zoning code on how to do that. The other thing to keep in mind is with all the specific plans we have, if you take the zoning map of the city and you kind of show all the specific plans, including the Uptown Town Center plan, the Olson South Chandler, the Beechwood, we're going to have Gateway. Those are large areas of properties that have specific documents applied to them. So when we think about, development of the Olson South Chandler specific plan, well, we're really going to be looking at the specific plan for the guides, the design guidelines for as those neighborhoods develop. That's how those specific plans were designed, not as much the zoning code. So if we think about what this zoning code rewrite's going to do and what it's going to apply to, it's really going to apply to existing neighborhoods, existing commercial. There isn't going to be a lot of new development that we're going to be using the zoning code for. So as we work through and we have these discussions, and as the Planning Commission kind of looks at the regulations, it really is going to be more of people, doing additions, doing additional units, or maybe there's a demolition and a redevelopment. I think that's going to be the focus of the zoning code, and I think that should be part of the focus of how this project is designed, as opposed to, grading ordinances and oak tree ordinances and things that deal with new development. How do we use the zoning code for working with infill properties and properties outside of these specific plans? And I think that changes the way we kind of look at some of these sections, and we'll be working with the consultants on that and with the HCOC, and, and hopefully, we'll have some planning commission sessions as well. But something to kind of focus on as you're looking through these sections, how they apply to what we'll be looking at.
Well, Darcy, we're shy of filling in all of the gridded boxes that are on the screen right now, but I hope this has at least given you enough of an overview of some of our interests that help guide the process and discussion going forward.
Absolutely. And as it was mentioned before, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you want to shoot me an email at 2 a.m, feel free. And just, jot down your ideas, and then I will continue to funnel those through to MIG, and we will start talking about how we can incorporate some future study sessions, kind of intermixing them, since we do have a schedule for HCOC coming up as well. So I think that the feedback we got tonight just gives us a really good start. So thank you, everyone.
Perfect. And thank you for agreeing to respond to our emails at 2:30 in the morning.
I didn't say I would respond. I just said you could send it.
All right. Moving right along, as we might say. Consent calendar is the next item on our agenda. We have 2 items. We have Development Review Committee minutes of August 16th and Planning Commission minutes of August 24th. Are there any comments or corrections for those? Otherwise, a motion to approve those would be in order.
This is Commissioner Christensen. I move that we approve those.
A motion for approval from Commissioner Christensen. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Davis. Please call the roll on that.
Commissioner Christensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Jorgensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Covarrubias.
Aye.
Commissioner Neal.
Aye.
Chairperson Kogler.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, we have a few other reports. The Housing Opportunities and Constraints Committee was just bantered around a few moments ago. Is there an update on that? Or does the discussion we just had suffice for that?
Yeah, I think the conversation we had pretty much covers that. Darcy and MIG will be working on scheduling some upcoming HCOC meetings, but those haven't been set yet.
Okay. Thank you. Railroad Street Ad Hoc Committee report.
Yeah, I don't think there's a specific update. We need to schedule a next meeting. I was looking at next week, Thursday, the 23rd at 11 a.m. Would that work for the committee members?
This is Commissioner Christensen. I thought we were scheduled for Thursday this week. I apologize.
Too.
Oh, are we this week?
Yeah, I have it on my calendar. I was just looking to double check on my calendar, and I have it for 2 o'clock on the 16th.
I have that as well.
And I do as well.
Okay. Well, that answers that. It's missing on my calendar. I'm glad we brought this up. Okay, so 2 o'clock on the 16th. Perfect. Even better. Yeah, we'll make sure everybody's got the same notice for that meeting. All right. And then Paso Robles Street, no updates on that either.
Okay. And how about the DRC rotation schedule? Any needed changes to that anybody would like to bring forward? If not, we'll assume that stands for the moment. We can always make changes in the future as need be. Item L on our agenda is Planning Commissioner's comments. Let's run down the line. Which line should we run down? Let's start with Commissioner Covarrubias.
Thank you. A long meeting, but very productive. Other than that, no other comments.
Okay. Commissioner Neal.
No comments from me. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Christensen.
I don't have any comments. One last thing on the rotation. I apologize for this. I guess I'm just kind of tired. The 4th and the 11th, I may be able to make those. So as we get closer, I'll try and Warren, I'll try and let you know as soon as possible what if I need any of those dates off. Sorry.
So I can jump in, Chairperson Kogler. If Commissioner Christensen is not available on the 11th, I can do the 11th.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll be here. I think my schedule has changed, and I think it might be later in the month. But I do appreciate that. So I'm going to put a note here on my schedule just in case.
And it also makes it easier to volunteer when you say you're going to be there.
It does, doesn't it? I can cover the 4th then under those same conditions. I probably could cover one of those if need be, so let me know.
Thank you, guys.
Okay. Let's see. We're going comments. Commissioner Jorgensen.
I have a question, if I may, not a comment. Mr. Frace, would you tell us what's going on with the motel whose name is escaping me at the moment at 46 West and Theater Drive? It looks like it's under renovation. Is work finally starting on that?
Yeah, that's the River Lodge Motel, was the historic name of that site. So that was a site that the city had acquired through litigation, and we have sold it. So there's a new owner of it. They have submitted a project to rehabilitate the motel. What they're doing right now is basically some demo work just to kind of clear out some of the interior of the old rooms, but they won't be able to do any construction or any exterior modifications until they've completed their development process. So we're right now in the first review. Darcy's the lead on that. We'll be issuing completeness items on that, and then that'll be coming back through for some sort of additional review process, either at DRC or Planning Commission. We're still kind of reviewing exactly what that final process will be.
Great, thank you. That's all for me.
Okay, Commissioner Davis.
No comments, just a question. Warren, do you anticipate staying virtual for our planning committee commission meetings?
For the near-term future, we're really trying to get a handle with the county on what the COVID trends look like. It's not clear whether we've hit a peak yet, but we'll have to get back down to a safe level, and we're well beyond that. Right now, our case rates are basically the same as they were in December and January.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I am in person at Cal Poly starting this next week, but the numbers are up, and who knows if it's going to change. So I was just curious what, where the city was coming in on that. Thank you.
Okay. And I really don't have anything. One quick question, just following up on Commissioner Jorgensen's. So the motel renovation that's going on, is that to turn it into another motel or something else?
Yeah, the applicant wants to restore it and turn it into basically kind of a high-end vintage boutique motel. So they want to retain the essence of the historic motel, but operate it more kind of like a four-star resort property. So I think it's going to be fairly similar to if you've been down to the Skyview in Los Alamos and down in Palm Springs, there's a number of kind of vintage motels that have been significantly upgraded. That's the approach that they're going to take to the River Lodge.
Cool. Okay. I have no further discussion points or questions.
Chair Kogler, I forgot to ask a question if I could.
You may.
Warren, I'm a little confused, and I know that the county is a superior agency, but on the airport commission and the county's purview over Paso Robles Airport, if just sort of how that works and the hierarchy and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so we sent out some informational item to the commission that the San Luis Obispo County Airport Commission will be reviewing the landing project, which is the boys' school reuse. So we have a airport land use plan that overlays basically the perimeter of the airport out about a mile or two in every direction. The purpose of the land use plan is to make sure that city development is consistent with the long-term operation of the airport. This is, I believe it's a state, if not federal requirement. So all airports have land use plans around them to try to maintain consistency in terms of uses. So we're no different. We have one. San Luis Obispo County City Airport has a land use plan as well. So the San Luis Obispo, so it's a county jurisdiction that's responsible for these airport land use plans and oversees them. So as projects move forward, if they're consistent with general plan and zoning, then there's no review that's required at the county level for any projects. But when we are changing either zoning or general plan, which is the case with the landing project, we do have to go before the County Airport Commission, and they are required to make a determination of consistency that that general plan change will be consistent with the intent of the adopted airport land use plan. So tomorrow, we're going to basically be providing an informational briefing to the San Luis Obispo County Airport Commission. We'll have to come back at a future date for the formal consistency determination. They weren't ready to schedule it for that, but they did want to brief the Airport Commission up on that. So that's kind of how the process works between the two. They really aren't looking at the project design, but they are looking at the uses, the overall intensity, number of people per acre, which is one of the key factors in the Airport Commission. So that's the level that they'll be looking at.
And so is the Airport Commission appointed by the supervisors?
I believe that they are.
Okay, I just found it interesting that none of our commissioners are on the Airport Commission.
Yeah, and I don't believe that there are many city planning commissioners that are on the Airport Commission. Typically,
I'm talking our airport commissioners. I'm sorry.
Oh, our airport commissioners. Yeah.
And would like to see maybe if, since we do have an airport commission, that may in the future, if that's something we could talk to the county about.
Yeah. Roger Oxborough, who's our airport manager, is actually the chairperson of the County Airport Commission. So the city is very well represented at the county level.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's it for me. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. Warren, did you have some other staff comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, just updates on some other projects moving ahead. The Olson South Chandler specific plan, they're hoping to break ground on the first phase in October. When and if that's a go, we'll have an event with the commission and the city council for the groundbreaking. They're also processing an amendment to one of the sub-phases. That's likely going to come back as a tentative map amendment with a development plan. The Beechwood specific plan is also moving ahead. They're working on a phase 1 small lot tentative map and development plan, likely to be on a commission agenda probably around November. The Red Tail Apartments, that's the big apartment project next to Food for Less, 200 units. Looks like they'll be breaking ground in October on that project as well. We'll probably have an event involving the Planning Commission for that as well. The commission asked for a briefing on the city's spaceport application process. That'll be on your next agenda. Also, the city's adopted a new urban water master plan. We're going to be providing a briefing to the Planning Commission on that item on your next agenda as well. And then in terms of the landing, boys school project, we do expect that to be on the DRC agenda next week to look at the warehouse distribution portion of the project. That's the 1 million plus square foot building. So look for that on DRC. And then just kind of an update item, the Censario project out on 46, that's where the Bruce Monroe light show is. We have issued a stop work for some grading activities that happened out there that weren't permitted. So we are doing some work on reviewing that issue right now. We'll keep the commission apprised of kind of what's the next steps to expect on that. And that'll conclude my comments. Darren says he has nothing else. I think we're done.
All right, with that, I would put forward a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn. This is Commissioner Christensen.
I think I just did that, but there's a second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, or just a voice vote is fine. Please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
We're out of here, folks. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night,
Good night, all.
everybody.
Thank you.